Well, hello all, and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's topic is preventing phishing attacks. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am thrilled to be your moderator for this extremely interesting conversation today. I want to start out with something easy. So raise your hand if you've heard of phishing. Okay, now raise your hand if you can name at least 2 different types of phishing attacks. Okay, now I can't actually see you guys, so I have no idea if you played along with me, but we're going to do some interactive polling in just a moment here. So that was your warm-up round right there. And I'm guessing that most of you put your hand up for both, at least mentally anyways, because phishing is pretty much top of mind for most of us these days. Every time we talk about security, every time we inevitably come to the human element. And that usually involves a conversation about burnout, fatigue, social engineering, and phishing. It is a big topic. It's a big idea and an ever-evolving one. So today, we're going to dig into phishing with the help of some absolutely fascinating presenters from KnowBe4, from Zscaler, CyberArk, Tessian, and Rapid7. These experts will cover tips, trends, solutions, strategies, and more. Everything you need to help coordinate your organization's understanding of and approach to phishing. Now, in order for you to get the most out of your day today, we've got a few housekeeping things that we're just going to go over to get us started. Now, we always have these wonderful prizes lined up for you, and I know that that icon draws your eyes, but hang tight because I'm going to come back to those in just a moment. But first, I want to actually pull your attention on over to the questions box in your webinar control panel. If you haven't already said hi, there's a big audience, a wonderful community out there today. Make sure that you reach out, give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Say hi and how's it going. That questions tab is also a great place to reach out to the Actual Tech Media crew. So if you're having any problems, any little tech issues, and you can't solve them with a browser refresh, that's going to get rid of just about any of the usual kind of issues. But if that isn't working for you today, shoot us a message there in that questions tab, and the Actual Tech Media team will be there to help. Now, the most important thing about that questions tab, though, is we want this to be an informative webinar, an informative and engaging experience. So throughout the conversation today, we hope that you'll get engaged, you'll get involved in the discussion. So send in those comments, questions, tips, discussion points, whatever you have in mind. We want to hear from you. So get those in that questions console there. Now, not only are we going to have team members responding to during the live webinar, we're also going to have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of each presentation. If we don't get to your question live during the webinar, don't worry. Those of you who have joined us before, you know they go by fast, those Q&A sessions, so we can't get to all the questions. But we do make sure that all the questions asked get to the teams that are here with us today. And the awesome humans from KnowBe4, from Zscaler, from CyberArk, from Tessian, and from Rapid7 are going to be following up with you after we wrap. Okay, the next thing I want to point out on your console there is that Twitter button, because, you know, when you just have that little exciting kind of aha moment when your brain kind of lights up and tickles, that's a great thing to share with your friends, with your community, and kind of spread that out into the world. So click on that Twitter button right there in your audience console. The hashtag for today's webinar is going to be automatically added to your post. Now, the last stop on our guided tour of your audience console today, I want to point out the handouts tab. You're going to find some fantastic resources and takeaways from our speakers. We've got just an info pack collection. There's solution briefs, there's white papers, there's data sheets, there's customer tutorials, there's free trials and ebooks, upcoming webinars. I mean, you name it, it's there. So click into that handout section and start kind of opening those tabs, download those resources, and save those for later. I promise you, you'll want to be looking into them after we wrap today. Now, for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jess Steinbach. Again, I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am so happy to be your moderator in this discussion. As always, we have the wonderful David Davis and Scott Becker here hanging out on live chat, so you've got the whole crew here bringing the excitement with you. All right, now I had said that I was going to come back to those prizes, so here we are. Now, today, you could win one of 3 $500 Amazon gift cards. We're going to give those away to 3 lucky winners who are here live at the webinar with us. And you do need to make sure that you're qualified to meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, we have them all written down for you, handy dandy handouts tab. So click into that handouts tab, scroll down to the bottom, you'll find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. Now, we also have another chance to win a prize. I mentioned earlier how much we love getting your questions in, and we really mean that. It brings up the whole engagement of the webinar and is just that much more fun and exciting for all of us out there. But on top of that, if you ask the best question today, and best I realize is a relative term, but we're going to be looking over all the questions asked after we wrap. And what we're looking for is interesting, insightful, or unique questions. So if you get that best question asked card, we're going to give one of those away for each one of those sessions, and that's $50 Amazon gift card. So make sure you get those questions in, both because it's going to be an awesome way to bring up the energy of the webinar, and also you could win that $50 Amazon gift card. Now, I've thrown up a few reminders for you on the screen here, including the fact that all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, so keep that in mind. Now, if you are a lucky winner here today, you do have the option to donate the value of your prize to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media webinars, thousands of dollars have been donated to these wonderful organizations. So if you're a lucky winner and you do want to get involved, please do let us know. We would love to help make that happen. I mentioned how happy we are to have you here live with us at the webinar today, and we want to keep that good feeling going. We want to connect with you on social, so make sure to find us on Twitter and on Facebook. We definitely want to hear from you. I'm also going to recommend that you check out the YouTube, the Actual Tech Media YouTube channel. There are so many incredible webinars waiting for you there on demand, so any topic you're interested in, you're going to be able to find something there to help kind of support you through that research journey. So do go check those out. Also, find us on LinkedIn. It's a great way to connect, and there's lots more content waiting for you there. Now, speaking of exciting content, some of you are familiar with this already. If you aren't, go check out the Actual Tech Media Gorilla Guide Book Club. Today's a great day to do it. I don't know about you guys, but it is gloomy and snowy where I am, so a good day to be cuddled up with a Gorilla Guide. So the Gorilla Guide Book Club is going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. You get to stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, if you're wondering, the books are going to work on your Kindle, they'll work on your mobile device, whatever you have, and they are completely free. So you can download all these awesome resources at gorilla.guide. There's a link for you in the Handouts tab as well. One last awesome way to win a prize today for those of you out there who are excited about those prizes, and why not, especially this time of year, a little extra Amazon gift card could come in handy as we're approaching the Black Friday sales or Cyber Monday sales. Okay, so if you are interested in this, you can refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. You're going to find a link to do that right there in the Handouts tab that we were talking about earlier. You're also going to get automatically redirected at the end of the webinar as well. I want to promise you that we're not going to spam your friends or coworkers. I know that's a concern when you send in a referral. We send them one invite to a list of upcoming webinars. If they don't respond, that's fine. We're going to send them a little bit of a reminder, just one reminder, to make sure that they haven't missed us. In email inboxes get busy. And that's it. If they don't respond to that reminder, we will leave it there, so they will not get bombarded. And then both you and your coworker could win a $300 Amazon gift card. We hold those drawings every month, so be sure to think of somebody awesome before you head out today and send them an invite. Okay. Now, normally, for those of you who have joined us on EcoCast, MegaCast, and Summits before, you know this is kind of where we break for a keynote. But we're going to do something a little bit different today. I mentioned that we're going to do some interactive polling. So we're going to play a little bit of a phishing game and see where you guys are kind of at in your understanding of phishing. So I'm starting with this one here. Now, one thing I want to point out to you, if you aren't familiar with this already, if you move your windows, if you kind of hover around the edge of your window, you can pull it out at an angle. You can actually make that slide window bigger. So if you're looking at that tiny little slide and you're thinking, I have no idea how to read that, you can actually make that slide window bigger by stretching it out to the right, to the left, up or down, or at an angle. And that'll make that a little easier to see. So handy dandy helpful tip for you as you're viewing the webinars. You're not changing anything for anyone else. Okay, so looking at this here, this is actually coming from phishing.org, and they have a wonderful collection of examples. And so in this case, we've got real emails next to phishing emails, and you get to kind of decide which one is which. So what I'm wondering is, which one do I have up here on the screen for you? So is that phishing or real? Definitely phishing. Take a hike, scammer. Seems legit to me. Plus, hey, I trust PayPal. Or, I don't know, I have no idea. So much indecision. What do you think? Click on the poll. Let us know. Phishing or real? Tell us what you think. I'm going to show the results in a second, so get those answers in. Let us know what you think. Okay, I see some good results coming in, so let's see what you guys thought. Okay, come in, a few more results trickling in. Get those answers in, get those answers in. Okay, so now most of you, it looks like about 80% of you said, yeah, that's definitely phishing. But there was a solid chunk, about almost 15%, that said, you know what, I'm not sure, lots of indecision, no idea. So here's the interesting thing on this one, and I'm going to show you, this is a phishing attempt, and here's how we knew. So if you zoom in, and I realize it's hard to see on the slide, so no shade to anyone who wasn't able to read that. But if you were to hover over the text links and look at what the response email is, what you'd see here is service.epaypal@outlook.com. So probably not coming from PayPal, who is probably spelling their name correctly in their email responses. So that will give you an idea of how sneaky these guys can be. All right, so now I'm going to give you another one, and I'm just going to tell you right off the hop, this one is a phishing attempt. We are looking at a phishing attempt. And I'm going to, leave this up for just a second here. And what I'm going to ask you in a moment is, can you figure out what the attempt is? Can you figure out what they're trying to get at? And do you have any ideas of how you would avoid that? All right, so take a look at that. Take a look at that on your screen. Yeah, Joseph, I see your comment here that not able to see the text. So yes, hopefully you did figure out how to expand your window pane. And anyone out there that's struggling to see, pull those slide boxes out a little bit so that you can get a closer view. Okay, I'm going to move over to the poll. So what's the risk? I'm honestly not sure. This looks pretty legit. I know I wouldn't click on it, but I really don't know why. Or I know exactly what this is. Let us know. What do you think? Yeah, I see Chase is saying Microsoft login phishing attempt. Good guess. Okay. Paul, phishing. Paul is talking about Fish the band. Okay. Great. Okay, I've got some good results coming in. I see a lot of, I know exactly what this is. Okay, so let's look at the results. So no one really said, I'm not sure, but it looks legit. Most people said, I don't know why, but I know I wouldn't click on it. And then actually about a little over half said, I know exactly what this is. So good for you guys. That's awesome. In this particular case, and I do want to credit that image came from Tessian, who we will also hear from today. And in this case, it's actually a spear phishing attack. And let me show you where it takes you to. So it's taking you to this fake login. So it's a domain phishing, and they've actually created a fake domain. And what you do when you go in here, and so see where it's got the little X's, that would actually say your email address. So when you got to the site, that would look completely legit. It would look like your regular login for Microsoft Teams. And then you would put in your credentials, and now what they actually have is your credentials. Now most of us, if we're being really honest, use the same credentials on at least a few platforms, if not all of them, that we're using for work. So once they have your credentials, they can log into all the other accounts that you're using, or at least make a pretty solid effort to, just by getting those credentials. So they don't actually need you to install anything. They just need you to enter in your username and your password. So this one is pretty tricky. There are a few ways, and we're going to get some helpful tips a little bit later on how you could avoid things like this. One really simple thing that I like to follow is when you get that email that says, hey, Asana has a notification for you, or Teams has a notification for you, or Dropbox has a notification for you. Instead of clicking through the email, I go to Dropbox, I go to Teams, I go directly to the source and check to see if there's notifications waiting for me there. So that's something to consider, but certainly this one, I have to say, very, very sneaky. Okay, let's sneak in. Oh boy, sneaking. I'm going to sneak in one last one before we wrap up here. Now, this one actually comes from some training that we did here at Actual Tech Media with KnowBe4. And so this one here, I'm going to actually move this pretty quickly because the reality is when you're looking at an email in your inbox, most of us are making the decision about whether or not we're going to click on it without even thinking. We're making that very quickly. So we just glance at the email. Oh, Human Resources wants to set up a meeting with me, so I should set that up. Wow. Okay, the results coming in are pretty resounding in one direction. So I'm gonna move forward and show you the answers here. Oh, I still see some results trickling in, getting some great responses. Okay, so I'm going to move to the results page. So here we had about 10% of you saying, yeah, HR is internal, I feel good about that, and about 80 some, almost 90% of you saying that you were not going to click on that link. Now let me show you why that was the right call. If you zoom in, now again, I know we're looking at a small screen here, but this is coming from Human Resources. So unless your team is playing it pretty fast and loose with your internal nomenclature, my guess is that you don't have Human Resources. And so that is a phishing message, a phishing email coming in. But sneaky, 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 it takes just a second of dropping your attention, right? Okay, so the last question that we have for you is just sort of a curiosity one, and I'm going to show you the results of this as well, but obviously we can't see who's clicking on what, so don't worry, you're not disclosing anything here. But has anyone in your organization recently fallen for or reported a phishing attack? And there's a few different answers here. So yes, and they reported it to IT, yes, and they clicked or responded. So by that I mean basically yes, and they stopped it immediately, or the second one is yes, and they basically fell for it. They clicked, they did the thing that the scammer wanted them to do. And then the bottom ones are no, we haven't gotten any phishing attempts in our organization. And then the last one is no idea. So I have no idea. I have no insight into that. Our company doesn't track it. We have no way to report it, or we don't share the information when it happens. So for better or worse, you have no idea. All right, so I'm seeing some good results coming in. I'm going to click over to the results page because I'm sure you guys are kind of curious where we all fall on that one as well. Has anyone in your organization recently fallen for or reported a phishing attack? So about 64% of you said yes, and it went right to IT. A scary 17% of you said yes, and they fell for it. And then we've got about a collective 20% that are saying, nope, we haven't, or no, I don't know. So that's some kind of interesting information. And I've seen a few of you kind of chiming in and saying, yep, we get some fake phishing messages from our team, and that kind of training, which is awesome. We do that as well, and that is really helpful to just kind of keep your brain alert and looking. Now, there are arguments also for fatigue, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Okay, the last question, you guys are familiar with this one as well. Oh, Jeffrey says that he's having fun. Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad you're having a good time. I'm enjoying this too. This is a nice start to the day. Last question you guys are familiar with. What's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? So basically, obviously, today we're here talking about phishing. What we're looking for is you're going to get some great solutions today to kind of helping assist with this, the human element, the phishing problems, social engineering, things like that. If you are looking to make changes in your organization, how soon are you thinking? And just give us a rough idea. I'm seeing actually across the board we're pretty split. This is one of the most even splits I've ever seen between all of them. So some of you are looking to make changes right away, some of you looking a little bit farther out, and that's pretty exciting to see. Well, speaking of exciting, I know that this next slide will get all of you pumped up, so I'm going to yes, okay. Our very first presenter in our EcoCast today really needs no introduction because most of you know and love him already. And I know that all of you out there are just as excited as I just got to hear from Roger Grimes, Data-Driven Defense Evangelist at KnowBe4. Roger, it is always a pleasure to have you here with us. I know that you have an absolutely info-packed session planned for all of us, so the platform is all yours.
Thanks everyone for showing up for my Hacking the Hacker, assessing and addressing your organization's cyber defense weaknesses. And I'm hoping to show you how to do that by showing you a little bit how hackers hack and then how you can use that knowledge to help defend against them. I'm Roger Grimes. If you haven't met me before, I've been doing computer security for 34 years. I've written 13 books and over 1,200 magazine articles on computer security. There's some of my books. I'll be covering some of the stuff that I wrote in some of those books here today. It's going to be fast-filled paced. I work for KnowBe4. We're the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor, which means we try to help you and your coworkers not to get phished. And that's very important because it's the #1 way that hackers and malware hack you, and we'll talk all about that today. We're going to talk about how hackers gather information on you and your organization, And really, again, kind of just show you how hackers hack, the different ways that they hack, and then how you can best defend yourself in your organization. Many times one of the most frequent questions I get is, well, why did they hack me? And it's usually one of two reasons: that either your company was a victim of opportunity, random target. Hackers are sending out tens of millions of emails every day. They're compromising millions of websites. And on this particular day, you or somebody in your company was just unlucky enough to get tricked, social engineered, and clicking on something or to revealing some information. And that's how they hacked you. That's how most people get hacked. But it also can be because somebody, a human hacker, decided to target you. That does happen, happens more today than it used to happen, but maybe is to the tune of many tens of thousands of years. And victim of opportunity attacks are millions of times a day, far more common. But regardless of how you get hacked, whether it's a victim of opportunity random attack or a human directed adversary, you defend against both those types of attacks the same way. In general, the hacker methodology, the hacker attack chain, the steps are, if they do all of the steps, is that they will do reconnaissance on you or your organization, trying to learn about it and looking for some type of plan of attack, and eventually decide, hey, I'm going to try to attack this company, this organization this way. They will gain initial access. We'll talk about the different methods they can use for that. And then they'll expand, explore, and exploit further and decide what they want to do next. And eventually they're going to execute their goal, whatever it was, ransomware or stealing money or something like that. And certainly not all hackers do all steps, but if they do all the steps, this is kind of the hacker methodology that they will use. And again, usually it's also one of three ways that it occurs. It can be, a lot of times it's because of automated malware, that you got tricked into running a Trojan horse program, or it was a computer worm or a virus or something like that. Again, it can also be because of a human adversary, but these days, more often than not, it was the initial access, the initial compromise happened because of some malware, with an email phishing attack or something. And then that malware, we say, dials home and lets the hacker know that they've compromised this particular environment, and then the hacker comes in and takes over. That's how most hacking happens today. It's kind of a hybrid combination of both. And very much like what I'm getting ready to show you, the typical attacker workflow is that somebody's connected to the internet. They usually get tricked into executing what we call a stager Trojan horse program that then modifies their device so it can live through a reboot. Typically then it will collect passwords that it can find on that device, and then it will contact its command and control servers over the internet. And those servers, the hackers will monitor those command and control servers and get a list of all the different things, all the different compromised victims, and the hacker can tell the malware program what to do. Typically, the malware will download other malware programs, tell it to spread in different places around the organization, steal passwords, as many passwords as they can get. The malware update itself so it stays ahead of the antivirus program so that they're not, scannable. Eventually, the hacker will log into the command and control servers, and they get a list of all the new compromised victims, usually by network name, IP address, and host name. So usually from those three pieces of information, the hacker can kind of figure out what type of company or organization that they've broken into this time. And then the hacker logs in remotely to the target and starts to, usually they upload scripts and they start doing things like eavesdropping on email, installing other malicious scripts and programs, and kind of deciding what they want to do to that particular company. Many times they're in the company for many weeks to months, called dwell time, all without being detected. The hackers come in, analyze, assess the target, and then steal whatever they want, emails or data or passwords or whatever it is. And then if they're ransomware, maybe they implement some ransomware program. But how I described it today, this typical attacker workflow, again, is probably how 86 to 90% of all attacker malware combinations work today. It's this combination of initial access gained through some type of Trojan horse program, or maybe because the person has unpatched software and has a vulnerability they haven't patched, or it could be because the attacker knows their password. One of those three ways, the most common ways that they get in. Although by far, since the beginning of the computers, the two most likely ways that hackers and malware get in are social engineering and unpatched software. Social engineering is involved in about 70 to 90% of all successful malicious data breaches. Unpatched software is involved in about 20 to 40%. And then there's usually a third thing. Social engineering and unpatched software have been the number one, number two ways that hackers and malware break in for the entirety of computers. The third thing kind of changes. These days, it's password attacks, where the attacker either knows your password, has socially engineered your password, or they can guess at your password. Those two or three things altogether account for 90 to 99% of all hacks. Everything else you can think of altogether only account for 1 to 9%, 1 to 10% of attacks in the average organization. It really is. If you want to stop hackers and malware, you better stop social engineering and patch your software and take care of your password issues. And we'll talk more about that at the end. But if you're going to defend yourself against hackers and malware, you need to first think like a hacker. So we're going to kind of cover it both ways and give you a couple of examples of what hackers do. But again, typically, if it's going to be this human adversary, hacker that's trying to break into you or your organization, they're going to try to gather as much information on the intended target as possible, typically using what's called open source intelligence, or OSINT. They're going to try to find out what information they can find using Google and things like that. They're going to try to enumerate, what company assets you have, what networks you're using, what types of devices, what type of operating systems, usernames, email addresses, any trusted third-party relationships, anything they can use to try to break into you, they will. And again, they many times will use what's called open source intelligence. There's hundreds of these open source intelligence tools out there anybody can download. You can even go to a GitHub website called Awesome OSINT and see them all. And I recommend that you download a few, try to see how much, and try to see if you can find out how much information about your company or organization is on the internet. Because let me tell you, there's a ton of stuff you can use, and at least you should understand what's out there on the internet about you and your organization. You shouldn't just let hackers be the only one that's trying to see what's out there. If you're lucky, sometimes you can get some of it erased, but here's an example, another awesome OSINT site called Awesome Hacker Search Engines, and it just has a list of like 100 different search engines, to download exploits, to break into people's companies, or to find people's email addresses. I use a lot of those actually when I want to contact company CEOs. Sometimes I want to write a letter and tell them, a complaint or something, and they never tell you what the CEO's email address is. So I go find it using open source intelligence tools. A really common open source intelligence tool that hackers can use to find information about your company is called ReconNG. It's, again, a free downloadable tool off of GitHub and other places. But essentially, you just literally put in the company's domain name that you want to investigate, like no4.com. And then there's all kinds of, in this case, this picture shows you 81 recon modules, reconnaissance modules. And you can look up things like email addresses, login names, passwords. That's a tool that a lot of hackers use. And again, I think everybody should run in that against their own company's domain to see what you find. Another common OSINT tool that hackers like to do is called the Harvester, and it gathers things like emails, email addresses, device names, operating systems, open ports and banners, anything that will give you a lot of information as a hacker you can use against the company. Really popular tool is Nmap, Network Mapper. It's been around for at least 2 decades. And a hacker or anybody can run this against somebody's domain, and it will tell you all the different, not only open ports that might be accessible from the internet, but more importantly, tell you the operating systems involved or the applications involved and the versions. The version numbers are very important because that will tell you whether or not the person has it patched. And let me say, in my 34 years doing security and looking at millions of devices, I've never found a fully patched anything in my life. Nmap is one of the things that tells me, that I have found unpatched stuff. There's even a lot of special hacking tools, like in this case, I'm showing you Nick2, that literally you fire that off against a website, and it will tell you all the possible exploits and vulnerabilities that are in a website, tell you what type of website it is, what version it is, and tell you exactly what you can exploit. And there's hacker tools for websites and databases and email engines and so on and so on. Cisco routers, you name it, somebody's built a hacking tool that will tell you how to hack it. And here's an example of like Nick2 on the screen here that's finding a vulnerability, a PHP vulnerability in somebody's database. And it's kind of interesting. They're saying that this suggests the host is vulnerable to the XST vulnerability because of some problem that they had with configuring PHP. And again, you don't have to be a hacker genius. They're telling you exactly the problem they found, and then all you have to do is exploit that. You can even look on the internet. If somebody has something that's publicly accessible from the internet, you can rent a service, buy a service, subscribe to a service like Shodan, that literally you put in a vulnerability like, oh, you have this particular vulnerability that you have or know about or can exploit. And Shodan will tell you all the publicly accessible sites in the world that have servers that are vulnerable to, like in this particular example, somebody was searching for a vulnerability for what's called Big IP. Big IP is a type of network equipment, what was called an open redirect on Big IP. And you can see there's some company names right there. There's IP addresses and company names. And if you're an attacker, you can start to take advantage of those vulnerabilities right away. And this used to be a free, Shodan used to be a free service. Now you got to pay a subscription fee, but it really isn't a whole lot. And again, it lets you find vulnerabilities all around. Here's another one where they're finding another common vulnerability, what's called common vulnerability exposure from 2014. So this is, and that secondary example, it's a vulnerability since 2014, and there's over 100,000 people that are still exploitable using that particular vulnerability, the Heartbleed vulnerability. You would think that Heartbleed would be closed by now since it's been over 6-7 years, but nope, there's plenty of it out there that anybody, good or bad intended, can take advantage of. Hackers will also look for unprotected online portals where they can do password guessing against. A lot of times it's email portals, but it could be VPN portals. But basically, if they're going to try to guess login names and passwords, they need to find one that's unprotected, that's not protected by MFA, that they can guess against. And you can do what's called Google hacking. Like in this example, I want to find out if there are any websites locatable on the internet that used Active Directory federated services. And that's because Active Directory federated services oftentimes is an older product. It's usually not patched and it's not usually well monitored. And when I did this search, you can look at the bottom of the screen, I found Tesla. So Tesla, if I was a Tesla employee and I went to log on in, Tesla requires multi-factor authentication to log into the Tesla corporate account. But I found an API, an ADFS API that was unprotected on Tesla that, if I was a hacker, I could start to take advantage of. So they call that Google hacking, where you just can go search and try to find things and unpatched software and vulnerabilities just by doing a little bit of Googling. But typically the hacker is going to try to find some exploitable, unpatched thing, like, oh, they're using, Internet Information Server, version 7, and it's unpatched. Well, there's literally dozens to hundreds of websites that have exploitation databases like exploit-db. It contains over 44,500 exploits. That you can just say, oh, I need a Microsoft exploit, I need a Windows exploit, I need an Apache exploit, I need an Apple exploit. You can literally just go look in these databases, then download these vulnerabilities. Sometimes you have to compile them, sometimes you run them in a scripting image like Python script that then attacks the thing that you've identified using those other tools I talked about the different vulnerable services. So that is a really, really common way that you can be compromised, which is, again, someone, a hacker looking for, identifying some unpatched vulnerability or service, running tools identifying that, downloading the exploit, and then running it against the thing. But probably the most common way is using social engineering. We talked about, remember, social engineering, unpatched software, number one. Number two way to compromise somebody. Even if you're using what's called multi-factor authentication, a lot of people get told, oh, use MFA, it stops 99% of attacks. That is not true, has never been true. But here's a really common multi-factor bypass hack that uses social engineering, and it works against probably 90-95% of all multi-factor authentication out there. But it begins with a hacker sends a phishing email to a potential victim, and that email looks like it's coming from a legitimate service, Microsoft or Google or LinkedIn or something like that. And if the user doesn't realize that the link that it contains is rogue, is bad, and they click on it, what happens is that instead of it connecting them directly to what they thought they were going to, the legitimate website, it connects them to what's called a man-in-the-middle rogue transparent proxy website, which is a hacker website that then connects them to the victim to what they thought they were going to in the first place. But then there's this man-in-the-middle website so that everything that the victim types in, their login name, their password, an MFA code or something like that, can be taken by the hacker and used against the victim. And anything the website sends back to the victim can be captured by the hacker. If you ever successfully log onto a website, you're always going to be sent back what's called an access control token cookie, which is kind of like, hey, you've logged in, here you are, this is your identity, this is your driver's license, you can be on this website. But the hacker can get that and then use it against the person. So they'll actually capture that access control token cookie, disconnect the victim, and then log in as the victim. And I'm going to show you a video that does that right now. I forget whether it's me or Kevin Mitnick's voice in this video, but Kevin's going to show you how to do a man-in-the-middle website that bypasses multi-factor authentication. So stand by for just a second. So here we are on an inbox, a regular looking inbox, and one of those emails has a phishing email. Kevin's going to click on it. It looks like just a normal email from somebody saying, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn. But this is a phishing email, and if the victim was looking at the URL, they'd see that it's LLinked.com, not LinkedIn.com. But a lot of people would miss that, think it was from LinkedIn, and then clicked on the button. When they clicked on the button, if they didn't realize it was taken them to the wrong place, if you look up in the top hand side there, it's LLinked, not LinkedIn. But really what this is a man-in-the-middle website that's capturing when the victim types in their login name and password. And even LinkedIn is going to prompt the victim to input their MFA credentials after they put in their login name and password. But really what the victim is connected to is a man-in-the-middle website that is capturing all that information, the login name, the password, and the multi-factor authentication code that they type on in here. So the person gets sent the code, they type it in, they think they're putting it to the real website, but really it's a fake website that's capturing it. And if you look behind the scenes there, the hacker, using their hacking tool behind the scenes, has captured the login name and password. The victim is actually in on the real website right now. It has passed them through to the real website. But this is what the hacker captures. You can see email address, password, and what's called the access control token cookie. They could have, if they wanted to, captured that 4 or 6-digit code that they typed on in, but they really, in this particular case, don't even need it because they have the website's cookie. Every time someone logs in successfully, whether it includes MFA or not, the website will send back a cookie that basically says, hey, you've been approved, you authenticated. The hacker can capture that and then paste it into their browser. So here is an example. Kevin is going into his browser, going to the LinkedIn real website. He's not even going to try to log in as the user with their login name and password. He's simply going to inject the stolen cookie into his browser session. He's doing it right here. He's going to open up the admin console, the developer console, copy that stolen cookie into his browser, and simply refresh his browser, and he will be logged in as the victim. And there is the attacker on the real website and as the victim. And this sort of attack would work against probably 90–95% of multi-factor authentication today. So pretty wild if you've never seen that before. And what I say in general, the defense is try to avoid any MFA solution that can be easily socially engineered or man-in-the-middle around using a man-in-the-middle website. Unfortunately, probably 90–95% of MFA that people use are susceptible to that man-in-the-middle attack. What I try to tell people is that whatever MFA that you're using, you should educate your users about what the MFA does, how it works, what it can't do, what it can't protect against. And probably the most important part is the common possible attacks for that type of MFA and how to recognize them and avoid them. Like in this particular example in the past, you could just tell the end user, hey, just be aware that it's common for scammers to send you phishing emails that have fake links and you think you're going to the right place, but it isn't. So you have to pay attention and hover over the URL before you click on it and make sure you're going to the right place. That would help prevent those sort of attacks. And you should do that for whatever MFA solution you have, which is educate people, again, about the types of attacks and how to avoid them. So I've talked about how hackers hack you, the social engineering and looking for vulnerabilities that are unpatched and that sort of stuff. So how do you defend yourself? Well, here you go. And if you're falling asleep, pay attention here, because this is the best advice you'll ever receive. Number one, do everything you can not to be tricked by social engineering, whatever it takes. Remember, 70 to 90% of all successful attacks involve social engineering, and anything you can do using policies and technical defenses and education to stop people from being fooled by social engineering is the best thing you can do. Also, patch your internet accessible software. 20 to 40% of all attacks involve unpatched software that the hacker then takes advantage of using some of the methods I showed you today. So make sure you patch your software, and especially anything that's on the CISA, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA.gov. They keep something called the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. Any vulnerability on that catalog is something that real-world attackers are using against real-world companies. There's a whole bunch of patches every year. Like last year, there's over 20,000 things that had to be patched. CISA has said that less than 4% of all those patches are ever used by any real-world attacker against any real-world target. And CISA has a list. You can subscribe to it, and they'll tell you what is being attacked by real-world hackers. And if you have software or firmware that's on that list, make sure you get it patched. Also think you need to use phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication wherever you can to protect valuable data and systems. And again, if you don't know what I mean by phishable and non-phishable, it was talking about using MFA that is not susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. And a lot of people say, well, what isn't? Well, I got a list. If you go to my LinkedIn list here of known good MFA, I will tell you exactly what MFA is phishing resistant. And you should use phishing resistant MFA whenever you can to protect yourselves. You're not going to be able to use MFA everywhere. You're going to have to use passwords. And wherever you use passwords, you should use really good passwords. A really good password is a 12-character fully random password, which is unguessable, uncrackable by any known adversary we know. If you create your own password, unfortunately, you're going to have to create a 20-character or longer passphrase or something like that. I have friends that routinely break 18-character passwords all the time for a living. They're not even, they're not as powerful as the nation state. So I really recommend that you use a password manager, because password managers create really long and random passwords that are different for every website and service. So I think you should use a password manager. But even if you don't, your password should be really difficult to guess at or to crack if they've got the password hash. And 12-character fully random or a 20-character human created one. You should also teach yourself, your coworkers, and your family and friends how to spot rogue URLs. Most social engineering attacks include these rogue URLs. And so you should teach yourself. I got some links there. I got a 1-hour webinar there that you can go watch if you want to see like 55 examples of rogue URLs and how you should have known they were rogue. And also got some article and graphics that you can download to teach yourself and other people about how to recognize rogue URLs. Really, of course, you should do everything you can to prevent phishing. I have a 1-hour webinar. If you want to see me talk about everything in my head, it's got 99 slides that how you can defeat phishing. There you go. This 1-hour webinar. If you don't want to be bored with me for an hour, you can read it. I've created basically the same content, everything I can think of to stop phishing in ebook format. I think it's like 46 pages long or something like that. Choose your poison, but both of these cover every policy, technical defense, and best practice education thing that you should do to try to stop phishing, which is really important because phishing is involved in 70 to 90% of all successful attacks. And know before, we're very big believers in training and testing people to make them less likely to click on a phish, what we call phish prone. We know for sure that if you train your people, you should give everybody good cybersecurity training when they get hired, and at least once a year thereafter. Everybody should get this longer cybersecurity training, maybe 15, 30, 45 minutes, an hour, at least once a year. And then every month thereafter, they should have shorter training, 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes of training. And you should at least monthly do simulated phishing, where you test how well they understood what you trained them. And if people failed that simulated phishing, they should get more training until they stop failing your simulated phishing test so much. Our customers that do that, the average person that comes to us, the number of employees that will click on a phishing email, any phishing email, is around 1/3. And after you do what we talked about, which is training in simulated phishing at least once a month and this longer thing annually, all of our customers get it down to around 5% within a year. And since that's the @1 way that you can be hacked, there's nothing you can do better. Thanks for putting up with me for the last 25 minutes. My name's Roger Grimes. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com, and I'll answer any emails you send my way. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And with that, thanks, and continue to fight the good fight.
Oh man, thank you, Roger, as always, for that incredible presentation. So much information. I don't know about you guys, but I find myself running to my notepad and yes, I still have a paper notepad at my desk to write down notes and try to get URLs down. And it's overload. It's fascinating. And I do want to point out that I did post one of the links that Roger was just talking about to that masterclass on security and phishing mitigation. So take a look in the chat there if you're looking for that. Again, just an incredible presentation. Now, Roger and I talked about this. We usually end up going right up to time because he's got so much content, and so that doesn't leave us a lot of time for Q&A. But I saw some incredible questions coming in, and I do want you to know that we are getting them immediately to Roger, to the KnowBe4 team, so you are going to get answers back. So keep those questions coming in because KnowBe4 and Roger, they will follow up with you directly. Also, Roger mentioned some of his contact info, and I can attest to the fact that he is very responsive. So if you do have a direct question, you want to reach out to him directly, please do get in touch with him. Now, you can see up on the screen here that I have put a poll question up. We want to know what additional information you would like from KnowBe4. So obviously, again, we're not digging in as much as we would like into some of the questions. So I know that you guys have a lot of follow-up information that you would like, and this is another way that you can let KnowBe4 know how they can check in with you, how they can follow up with you, how they can help support you. So please do take a moment now and click on that poll. I also want to let you know that if you click into the handouts tab and select that KnowBe4 link, there's a free phishing security test. So you can actually find out what percentage of your employees are phish prone. This is a super helpful place to start your phishing journey here. You need to understand just how big the risk is, or maybe not at your organization. You might be totally phishing proof. Who knows? Knock on wood. And if you are one of those lucky few phishing proof organizations, then great. You don't need to stress as much. But my guess is that that is not the case for most of us. So go ahead, click on that link, take that test. That's a great place to start. All right, well, while you're clicking on that link and filling out the poll, I have some good news for you all. It is already time for our very first prize giveaway. Now, I'm going to remind you again that you do need to be here live, present at the EcoCast in order to win. And if you are entered immediately just by being here to win that $50, $500 Amazon gift card. Add a zero on there, $500 Amazon gift card. So our very first winner today is Daniel Hawkinson of Illinois. Daniel Hawkinson of Illinois, you have won a $500 Amazon gift card. And as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap the webinar today. Don't forget, there's still 2 more chances to win that big $500 gift card today, plus a Best Question gift card that we'll be giving away to somebody in each session. So every time we wrap, we review all the questions asked in each session, and then we will pick that best question and we will follow up with them. So keep those questions coming in. All right. Well, speaking of exciting things, we're going to move along to our next presentation here because we have another awesome presenter. I am so happy to introduce you all to Emily Lawfer. She's the Threat Research Product Marketing Manager at Zscaler. I was chatting with Emily a little bit earlier. She has an absolutely fascinating presentation lined up for us. I can't wait to dive in. We're going to earmark some time for questions and answers at the end, so it's going to be a great time. Without any further ado, Emily, the platform is all yours.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to be talking about phishing trends with everyone who's joined us. Let's get into it. From Zscaler, I'm Emily Lawfer. I represent our Threat Labs team. This is a team of over 150 threat researchers that we have around the world that do daily threat intel research, and they help us to protect all of our customers by doing over 250 daily security updates that help block threats that they discover. So this all comes out of the Zero Trust Exchange. That is Zscaler's cloud environment where all of these transactions take place every day, over 240 billion transactions that our threat researchers get to look at and examine and basically digest for threats. And then they push out their research as well as the security updates that our customers benefit from. And some of the other things that they do is they provide that insight back to us And we're able to develop some different reports and information that we can then share across the industry around specific threat trends like phishing, which is what we're going to be looking at today. For more information about Threat Labs, you can definitely visit our website, and you can see all the latest security research in our blog under security research. All right, so what did we see last year in terms of phishing trends? Well, important, we saw a 29% jump in phishing attempts globally. So if you thought phishing was old news, it's not. And we're going to dig into deeper what exactly we saw across this. But it's important to note that phishing continues to increase and to be solidified as the top threat that organizations are facing today. All right, let's dive into the 2021-2022 phishing trends. As I mentioned, we saw that 29% overall year-over-year growth in 2021 compared to 2020. We also saw a 436% increase in phishing attacks against retail and wholesale. This is no surprise given that we were in a pandemic and there was so much online shopping going on during that time. The attackers will follow the money, just as they did in Singapore, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, a very, very lucrative place for attackers to target. So we saw that jump up again, and it jumped up the previous year, and we may continue to see that rising as long as there is big profits for those attacks there. Interestingly, most of the attacks in Singapore surrounded kind of government agencies and things like that, notifications where people were being warned by those governing bodies and stuff like that. And then they were taking that very seriously, similar to maybe IRS attacks in the United States. And we also saw 60% of phishing attempts against victims in the United States. This is no surprise. The United States gets hit pretty hard by most of the threats that we analyze. And 31.4% of attacks looked at using Microsoft themes. So they tried to imitate Microsoft. And again, Microsoft being the most widely used software, this is no surprise to us either. And 96% of attacks were waged through direct links in email, messages, and others, so directly to those users. Let's break it down a little bit more. The most targeted countries include the US, of course, Singapore, Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK. So we already talked a little bit about why the United States and Singapore would be up here. And then with those other ones, you're going to see again, these are lucrative places for them to attack. We did actually see a little decrease in the Netherlands for this year's report. And that was due to some legislation that was actually passed, further criminalizing it and helping to protect the Netherlands from those type of attacks. So look out for how legislation can impact different attacks. But if you're in one of these locations, if your industry is your organization or you have offices, probably employees, you do business with them, chances are you're definitely going to need to be thinking about this and making sure your protection is up to par. Let's look now at phishing attempts by industry. Retail and wholesale, the pandemic made this a big target. And along with that, manufacturing, which would be feeding into that retail and wholesale business. Services, we did see services come in at number 3, but of course, coming off the heels of the pandemic, there was a rise in services, making them more attractive, but also a decline still from being in the remote world and not quite everything opening up yet in 2021. Technology and communication, and you can kind of go down the list. One thing I want to note is healthcare. Healthcare is actually, on there. We saw a slight decrease in healthcare, which was interesting, but that data was over 2020. So of course, in 2020, healthcare being the big target with the COVID, right? And all the tests and the different things and information going around, healthcare was a really good one for phishing. But after that, we saw that decline and it switched over to retail and wholesale, where the real money was for those attackers to go ahead and try to get a hold of. And you'll see on the right here, we have that comparison of which ones, jumped versus which ones did not. All right, next. So one thing you should know, and probably already do, is that phishing attacks mimic popular brands and capitalize on the current events. Again, on the COVID-19 pandemic, on, buyer trends, economic trends. They're going to look at things like the Super Bowl, the Olympics, elections, anything where they can sort of pop up and get out attacks that are not that are kind of emerging and not your everyday. If you always go to the same site every day to watch football and you log in and that's that, you may not be so subject to one of these pop-up attacks. But in the case of the Super Bowl, if you have to go to another third-party site that you've never used before, you're not necessarily going to know the protocol or what site it is, or if you're on a legitimate site or not. So this is a great way to attack people. And also, you'll see here the illegal streaming, another great way, because it's not something where it's very consistent, like your banking, online banking, right? This is something where illegal streaming is something that you will go do and you're expecting sort of something different. If it's already an illegal activity, you're watching a video, you shouldn't be, something like that. All of a sudden, people are put off guard and they're a lot more likely to make mistakes and click on the wrong links and enter the wrong enter personal information into the wrong kind of sites. Next, growing tactics are driving successful phishing attacks. So what are we seeing? We're seeing phishing as a service, the rise in services all across different threat types, actually. So this is enabling, non-technical, novice, new criminals to get in the game and use different threat types efficiently and like experts. And in the case of phishing, they are able to get these phishing kits that, bring them right up to speed with more advanced attackers and use those and leverage those against the organizations that they're targeting. So maybe they have a lot of recon information on a type of organization or an industry, but they are not tech savvy enough to go and craft all those threats. Or maybe, they're targeting an English-speaking country and English is not the first language, and they just want to buy these phishing kits with the pre-built templates so that they can go ahead and send out those messages in perfect English so that they're not caught by certain anti-phishing detection sensors or users. Users are getting really savvy as well to phishing attacks, and we've been dealing with it for a long time, learning how to detect those and say, okay, this looks suspicious. I'm not going to just enter my credit card information when I'm getting this strange request, in broken English or something like that. Versus, now we have these very, very sophisticated attacks on the scene, which are throwing users off because the sites, which we'll get into in a minute, may look exactly like the real sites. The imitation is very, very good. The messages and the language and the grammar, very, very convincing, polished, exactly what you would want if you were an attacker trying to extort someone, and not what you'd be expecting, as a user necessarily, in terms of what does a phishing attack look like. So we're really seeing that evolution take place, and that's why we're seeing so many attacks still happening and the rise of those attacks. We also have smishing attacks. So this will help attackers, for example, in the headlines recently, we've seen a lot of bypass multi-factor authentication. They're sort of sending those authentication requests over and over again until the victim is confused, or maybe it's in the middle of the night, or they accidentally push accept. And we're seeing other versions of smishing attacks as well coming in, over SMS messaging, where they're trying to get you to believe something, click on a link, take the next step, of course. And then browser attacks. These are invisible to the naked eye. So as I was discussing before, the attacks are getting more sophisticated. And now you can't tell when you're having, a browser in the browser attack, whether or not that's a legitimate site, or is it being hosted by an illegitimate site that's now saying, here's a copy of this. unless you know what to look for. We'll get into that a little bit more, but those are those super stealth attacks. If it looks like the site I always log into, I'm going to log into it, potentially. Going over those phishing as a service, the offerings, we see a whole variety. Here's just a few. I don't have too much time today to touch on everything. But what's important to note is those things are coming out with all different types of offerings. So no matter where you are in the spectrum of the attack, you can pull on something, one of these resources from, the underground, the dark web, things like that, to help make it easier if you're an attacker. And as defenders, that puts us at a big disadvantage because these guys can now move so much faster than we can in some ways. We'll get into that in a minute and how we can actually move just as fast as them and how we can defend against this anyway. But point is, they have these fully packaged up. You can get these PHP and HTML files in order to mimic fake sites and things like that. Traffic distribution systems, detection avoidance mechanisms, things that will actually go in and make, mask things and make them look like they're legitimate, make copies and folders, exfiltration methods that use, popular messaging apps and things like that to help exfiltrate important data and verify that data, sometimes making users re-enter data multiple times, back-end control environments, you name it. All across the spectrum of these attacks, there are services available to help those new or experienced, whoever is in there, complete their goal and phish your organization, unfortunately. And as we know in this industry, a lot of times phishing attacks are the initial attacks that lead later on to some of the larger things like ransomware attacks, those really deep hitting types of threats. So it's important that we curb this as much as we possibly can and that we think holistically about how to protect our environments in the best way possible. Protecting our users, protecting our environment, and preparing for the worst. So I promised that I would talk you through the browser in the browser, also abbreviated BYOD techniques, and get into that a little bit. So what are these? They are simulating a browser window within another browser window to spoof that legitimate domain. They hide the real URL and then prevent a user from navigating away from this fake page. So how do we identify these attacks? One of the things is to drag the window to the edge of the browser, and if you can't escape it, then it's probably not a real window. The address bar, try and minimize, maximize, refresh, back button, these are all going to be fake and unclickable. So if you're trying to click in the browser bar and you can't do that, big red flag. On the inability to move or resize the window, because once you resize it or move it, you may see that other browser behind it. So what are these best practices against defending against this or preventing this? Well, number one is, of course, remaining vigilant and understanding how to identify these attacks when there's something suspicious happening. And part of this is the user awareness training of saying, when you're going to a site that's new for you, when you're undergoing a process that's different, you've clicked a link of some kind. Well, first of all, you should really be navigating away from that and going to the ways that you know are verified to access that. But second of all, if you are going to be doing that, make sure you do some of these things to make sure, like, hey, is this actually the real site that I think it is? Using a password manager can actually help. The password manager can detect what the parent site is and see, hey, this is not actually the real site here. And then two-factor authentication, that helps you in two ways. One, if you're not being prompted for two-factor authentication, you can assume that you are going into, the wrong site. But then two-factor authentication on the other end is now you've just entered your credentials and someone's going to go log into your legitimate account and try and change the information, but they don't have the ability to verify with two-factor authentication. So they're not going to get very far, which is then going to give you the ability to go in and change that and prevent them actually getting into your legitimate, maybe banking account or site. And here's a little example of what one of these looks like. So this, of course, has been moved so you can see, because normally you wouldn't actually see. But this is something that our researchers found and examined, and they have blogs on these attacks all the time that break them down and give you the nitty-gritty details. But in this one, we had supernight.world, but it looks like it's india.gov, right? Down here, .in. And so this looks like the official thing here, where you're supposed to put in this case, your credit card number and confirm that. And there's, some message here about what you need to do, some fine need to be paid. So sometimes this may be something like you access something or did something you weren't supposed to, and now you have to pay a government fine. We see this with, in this case, it's pornography, and we see it with other things that are kind of against the law there. And so in this one, they say, oh, now you have to pay a fine, which is not the case. Of course, this is all being pushed against the user and made to look like this, but this is not an actual thing. But the user sees it, says, oh, whether they were or were not partaking in any type of activity as, accused here, they're going to think, well, I have to pay this. Like, I'm being told I have to pay this. And this is like the legitimate website. And I don't want this to get go further than this, because they say, like, if you don't do this, you'll be referred out for something else. And so people are afraid of embarrassment and things like that. And then it looks legitimate, they pay it. It's a total scam. And if they were able to detect that, they would see that this is really being hosted by a different site. Talking about prevention guidance. How do we protect organizations from these type of attacks? And as I discussed before, they're getting really smart. These are getting sophisticated. What are we going to do? How do we put our defenders back on top and at an advantage here? So, of course, number one, understand the risk better to inform policy and strategy. These are some of the things we've talked about just in the case of like the browser and the browser attacks. What are some of the things that you can look for and do, and user training and things like that? Number two, leverage the automated tools and threat intel to reduce phishing incidents. Researchers are on top of this stuff. They are trying to pump out that threat intel as fast as possible. Automated tools can also look up things and provide a lot of capabilities, to examine things for our security teams and tell them right away whether or not that's okay, and even block things before they reach the end user. So definitely you need to be leveraging the right tools and intel. And three, implementing zero trust architecture to limit the blast radius of successful attacks. Similar to how I described the MFA, right, is having that in place. Then even when something happens and you go ahead and put in the credentials, you then have a second layer of protection. This is how zero trust operates as well. Putting in a zero trust architecture can limit that blast radius, prevent a lot of lateral movement, prevent them from getting to the things within your organization that can cause a lot of harm. 4, deliver that timely user awareness training, build security awareness, promote user reporting. 5, simulate phishing attacks to identify gaps in your program. Test. This is always important. You got to keep people on their toes. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to fly by the next couple things. Common indicators of phishing page. You guys can definitely dive into this more, but look at the headers, look at everything on there, and look for errors and mistakes that look like they would be common text, like they look like actual characters, but really they're secondary characters. And now let's just look really fast at how Zscaler uses that zero trust to mitigate phishing attacks. Number 1, preventing compromise. There is full SSL inspection of all your traffic going through Zero Trust Exchange. And so that's what you want. You want to make sure that that's all happening across every type of tracking, including SSL, where 90%, of those scams are going to be hidden. You want to eliminate that lateral movement. No lateral movement means they can't get to anything important. They're stopped right then and there. Shutting down compromised users immediately and making sure that those attacks don't reach end users. So sometimes it's shutting down those attacks as well. And then stopping data loss. You got to have robust, data and motion analysis, detection, for potential data theft and be able to stop that in real time, so that if, the worst case scenario is happening and they're in your network and they're doing things, they cannot take anything away without you finding out. I have a bunch of predictions, and instead of going through them, I'm going to suggest that you guys check out the full report where all of these predictions are actually discussed at length in detail. So not just the highlights, but really you can go ahead and get the details on them. So you'll be able to download that report using this link. And hopefully we're able to link that in there, Jess, and you can put that through so that they can get to the actual link here. But otherwise, look for the 2022 Threat Labs phishing report, and definitely visit our Threat Labs blog to get more information. I appreciate the time I've had with you today. I'm going to take a couple questions before I head out. Jess?
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. Yeah. That was awesome. Such good information, really great context. And some good helpful solutions there. I mean, I'm curious about those predictions too, so I'm definitely going to go check those out. We have a ton of questions coming in. I know we're not going to get to them all, but I do want to try to sneak in a few. You ready to dive in?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Emily, you just gave us a bunch of some of the types of attacks and kind of walked us through some of the different styles of phishing. One question that did come in early on was, what are the styles of phishing? I know you gave us a few examples. Are there any examples that we didn't get to touch on today that you think would be important to kind of give us an overview?
Absolutely. Actually, this is a great question. There are so many different types, and we're adding as an industry to this all the time. And we actually don't always agree on what all those types are, but we're really trying. We are, and we're getting closer all the time. So, we went ahead at Zscaler and threw in all the types that we know of in our Threat Labs phishing report for 2022. So you can check that out. We also plan to kind of throw that out there in a blog at some point to make it a little easier to even Google and find those different types. But we plan to update this year over year as the industry and kind of researchers shift their thinking about what are the main categories and buckets of phishing attacks. I think we have about there's 21 or 22 different types in the phishing report. So if you want to go find out what those are, download it, check it out, and share it with your colleagues. And you can, always reach out to me. Tell me if you don't agree, if there's one I missed, if there's a, definition you'd like me to update. I really appreciate that. Next question.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are very close to the end of time here, but I'm going to sneak in one more because I love this question. I'm so glad somebody asked it, because I'm curious about it. So you just gave us a bunch of these different types, and I think some of them we're more familiar with, but even if we weren't familiar with each of the specifics, we hear about phishing all the time now. So this is in our sphere of understanding. Why are people still falling for phishing scams? Aren't we aware of them by now?
Oh, well, I sort of touched on this, but, aren't phishing scams old news? No, they're not. They're here to stay. They're so effective. Pulling off a big, large-scale heist is much harder than maybe snagging a purse on the street from a tourist or something like that. And the thing is that it's, when people are involved, there's always a way to kind of fool people, right? You can appear genuine. And that's what's so tricky about it. And then they're getting smarter and smarter, and they're using all these services to really mask what they're doing and make them just such sophisticated threats where the end user, and even sometimes the security researchers just on site have no idea that this is an attack until they start digging below the surface. This is why we have to take such a holistic approach. You need to have the user awareness training. You need to have, automated threat detection, threat intel enrichment to help you stay on top of what's been discovered lately. And then you need to have zero trust architecture in place so that when we know that even that some of those are going to get through after you've implemented all this automation, all this technology, and all this training, some of them are still going to get through. So now we need to just limit the ability for those threats to take root in our environments and cause harm. So we're going to be dealing with this forever, and we can't stop. We can't say there's one approach. It's all of it. It's holistic. And that's why. So I appreciate those questions. I know we're out of time. I'm going to be sticking around to answer things on the live chat. Please, please send in your questions and your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Jess.
Oh yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And before we turn camera off, I do want to ask you, if somebody is really excited to jump in with Zscaler, what do they do? What's their first step?
Yeah. So if you are ready to talk about this solution for your organization, you should go to our website at zscaler.com, and you should go to the live chat, or you should click on, sign up for a meeting and get in touch with us. Somebody's going to get right back to you. Someone is going to help start walking you through this process and looking at your environment and saying, what can we do to help you with this transformation? And really getting into it and answering all the questions that this probably raised for you today, because we just scratched the surface on this.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out some more too from the phishing report. So if you want to go and you're kind of thinking through this, go read that. And there's a lot more information at the end about how Zscaler can help you bolster, your security strategy and approach towards phishing attacks.
I love that. Some great ways to get started. Yeah, we're going to keep rolling along now, but as Emily just said, she'll stick around and answer some questions on live chat. So keep those questions coming in. We will make sure that any questions we didn't get to go to Zscaler. So you'll get answers either today live or in follow-up. We're going to hop over to a poll question now, but Emily, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you, Jess.
All right, and you can see that poll is up on your screen now, and what we want to know is what additional information you would like to get from Zscaler. So I said this to you guys before, but when you're taking in all this information, it's so much, and I know that right now it all feels really top of mind and it's really front and center in your brain, but you're going to walk away from this webinar and you're not going to be able to retain all of it. I wish that we could, right? We can remember song lyrics from our childhood, but we can't remember something we just learned 5 minutes ago. So you're going to lose a lot of this information. So click on the poll now, and what that's going to ensure is that Zscaler is going to follow up with you and send you the information that you need, the information that you're looking for, and help remind you of all the cool stuff that you've just learned about. So make sure that you do take a moment and click on that poll. I also want to let you know that the link that Emily was just telling us about is actually in your Handouts tab. So if you head on over to that Handouts tab, click on that link there for Zscaler, and you can find that 2022 Threat Labs phishing report. Such an interesting read and absolutely worth clicking now, opening up, download, save for after we wrap. I promise you're going to want to dig into that a little bit more. But for right now, and again, Emily's going to stick around on live chat and continue to answer those questions, so you will get some answers from those. And I do want to thank everyone who filled out the poll. But we are going to keep moving along now because we have another awesome presentation to get to, and I know that you guys are all going to enjoy this next one. Some of you will recognize the speaker from previous presentations, so you know that it's going to be a great discussion. Brandon McCaffrey is here with us, Lead Solutions Strategy Architect at CyberArk. Brandon, it is always such a pleasure to chat with you. I can't wait to hear what you have in store for us today. So the mic is all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Appreciate that. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So we got to start off with a pun, right? So getting phished, what's the best practice for getting off the hook? Little joke for everyone in the morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So I'm going to be representing CyberArk today. Who am I? Brandon McCaffrey, as Jeff said, my title. I do represent our identity and access management portfolio, both like the solution and product strategy there. And so what I'm going to be talking about is recent trends that we've been seeing from customers, what we've been hearing and seeing in the market, the best way practices for protecting yourself against phishing, how to fight phishing, what to do if and probably when, unfortunately, we get phished right at our organization. And then we'll chat about next steps you can take to keep on your journey of protecting your business against phishing. But real quick, gotta give my version of history here, right? For phishing, it's really not a question of if, but when, if we're being honest. Unfortunately, a lot of these things in security are. And why is that, right? Why is phishing so prevalent? Why is it such a strong attack vector for the bad guys? And really, we know that humans are hardwired to trust other humans, right? Whether you're looking at studies from like brain chemistry of infants or behavior in Ponzi schemes, humans are hardwired to trust and communication from other humans, right? And this is the tale as old as time. In fact, many of you might know in your history classes the story of the Trojan horse, right? And so we as humans for a long time have been trusting of other people. Now, what's changed? Really not. The humans haven't changed that much in hundreds of years, if we're being honest, from a physiological standpoint. But technology has changed, right? And how we interact with other humans has definitely changed, and a lot of it has come online. So some of the recent trends we're seeing are things like easier social engineering. So for example, LinkedIn has become a very popular social media platform where users are willingly exposing quite a bit of personal information about themselves, like the companies they work for, the job duties they have, etc. And this is a great vector for attackers, right, to understand your information, to create profiles on you and on people in your business. And sometimes we've been seeing, most recently with nation state actors, the accumulation of data and creating a profile on a person for months, and sometimes even longer term interactions before delivering the payload via the phishing mechanisms. So social engineering we are seeing as a trend that's still in the early stages of fully developing as an attack vector. Definitely there are more and more online identities to exploit, more credentials to be phished. In fact, in recent surveys that CyberArk has put out to the average enterprise, we're seeing them have over 200 different applications that power the business. And by the way, that number is not going down, right? It is expanding and getting larger as more and more applications are brought on to do more and more kind of niche business processes. And on top of that, this isn't just these aren't just human identities. There's also machine identities to consider. When you have a 45-to-1 ratio of machine to human identities, thinking about the supply chain and the explosion of machine identities becomes all the more relevant as well. And then lastly, we're seeing more and more creative ways that attackers are actually phishing individuals. To give you an example, one thing many people are familiar with are onboarding emails to new systems. Say, hey, welcome to this new system. So it's becoming very common for attackers to send these sorts of emails to individual employees, rolling out a new system, pretending to be IT communication, and getting users to click links that way. And even on the IT and security side, getting IT and security to fall for clicking security alerts and security notifications. So attackers are finding more and more kind of innovative ways to reach out to us, to communicate with us, and to try to trick us. And so, what can we do as individuals and as folks representing the security of the business and the IT of the business? Well, there's 8 different ways we'll chat on here, but the first one, and maybe one of the most important attack vectors you can take away from these attackers, are the actual credentials themselves that are being phished. And so if we take a look at what that looks like, and like I said, we'll get into all 8 in a second, but the first I want to talk about is this phishing resistant factor. So imagine if you could, signing into your work applications, like your Salesforce, your HR systems, et cetera, all without a password, without user credentials. That is what the industry and what CyberArk is trying to help the world get to, where users no longer have a set of credentials that could be stolen or could be hacked, and we now have a new age of strong credentials built into systems that can act as a way of identifying us. So those are using things like FIDO2 and WebAuthn so that your device is actually equated to your identity. And there's more controls you can put over that, but essentially getting rid of the ability for users to even fall for a fake website and put in credentials that could then be used to attack you. And things like, there are even new innovations that CyberArk has come out with in this regard, and other folks in the industry, like QR code technology, where you can actually do passwordless, keyboardless authentication and use your phone as your identifier rather than user credentials. So one of the main ways you can, eliminate phishing is to eliminate credentials that could be phished, and this is a great way to do it. So that's kind of the first area we were talking about there, and in fact, you did see recently Cloudflare is a success story of this, right? There were phishing attacks that were prompted to Cloudflare employees, but those were stopped because Cloudflare had phishing-resistant MFA in place. They had FIDO2 tokens that forced users to authenticate. Ergo, they were not breached as a result of these kind of attacks. So we're already seeing these kind of phishing-resistant MFA mechanisms work in the industry, and I think you're just going to see those expand across businesses. And one other trend that I just want to touch on real quick around this is MFA fatigue and MFA bombing, where we've seen users currently MFA has started to become extremely common at businesses, which is great, but those push notifications to your phone have become one of the most common ways of implementing MFA, and we've seen in some recent events how that can actually lead to its own attack vector, right? So doing things like implementing number matching for those push notifications is one thing CyberArk is doing and that other folks in the market are doing to actually make sure that users are in front of their device, they're not blindly accepting push notifications, and that we're giving users a way to make it even more difficult in times where attackers are trying to bomb them, give them fatigue. We're making it even harder for attackers to do that to them. There are foundational zero trust policies that you can do. So things like implementing MFA, not just maybe at your identity provider login, but think of doing that everywhere else too, right? So maybe not just when people are signing into Microsoft or signing into CyberArk, but what about MFA when they're signing into a machine, or if they're going to be running a privileged task on that machine, like the user is going to be running PowerShell as an administrator. Well, those are great examples where MFA everywhere as much as you can is great, and then let's put in those phishing resistant MFAs if and when credentials do get phished, right? Segment your market. I'm sure you've heard from some of the other vendors that on today that are really great at helping you do that. So definitely if a user gains access to one network, taking away the ability for them to gain lateral access to other resources that are business critical at the organization, that's great, that's amazing, and you absolutely should segment your network in that fashion if you can. Do secure your devices. We talked about that already with MFA at the endpoint, and also it's great to do MFA on those privilege escalations, but one thing that you might think about is, hey, does my average user need privilege on their endpoint? Do they need administrative rights? In what areas do they need administrative rights? And can we limit the amount of admin rights we're giving out on the devices themselves? And maybe just MFA in scenarios where users do need privilege elevation. So think about those kind of controls for your endpoint so that if a user's AD credential is phished, you're limiting the exposure of that endpoint. Of course, revisit your BYOD policies, right? So anything off of your network becomes a bit more tricky, a bit more dicey to be able to put controls in front of. So we know BYOD is a reality at organizations, but does everything need to be accessed from a user's personal device? Are there areas where you can mitigate exposure there and really try to restrain the systems that are being accessed from the BYOD, and any systems that are, can we make sure that there are really strong security policies around those systems that are able to be accessed on our mobile device? And of course, I know this is a hot topic. There's actually a little bit of debate on it, but I am all for phishing exercises, assuming that you're doing them the right way, right, with good intention, with good communication to your users, not to trick and not to punish, but to teach and to help users really become that first line of security. Phishing exercises can be a great tool to prevent this when they're used in the right way. And then additional kind of recommendations here. So you all are great for attending this kind of webinar, right? Learn from all the experts in the field, learn from the vendors out in the field, what they're seeing, what prevalent attack vectors are, and of course, learn from advisors as you can too, like security advisors, different partners that you might bring on as external consultants, or even some of the latest research, right? Read up on everything that the industry has out there as much as you possibly can. It's all good information, right? But very importantly, and I think the piece that can sometimes get missed at organizations I've worked with is getting collaboration internally, right? So having trust between IT and different departments at your internal organization, that's going to be huge when you think about building out things like new MFA factors you might want to bring to the business, or things like these phishing programs that you want to roll out. It can sometimes be difficult to get adoption and buy-in from other areas of the business. So having good trust and a good relationship with other business owners will only help you roll these programs out successfully and have compliance with these types of programs. And then lastly, you know, this is all great, right? We've talked about, okay, here's some great ways we can prevent phishing from happening. You're still going to get that phone call, that text message, hey, I got phished, or your stock is going to figure out that, hey, someone got phished. And so what do you do there, right? So, you know, ideally, hopefully you have centralized authentication in place today. If not, go do that, of course. But ideally, you have that in place. And if you do, check for anomalies, right? Did someone sign in from a different country, a different device, outside the corporate network, right? If these things are happening, okay, first off, why were they allowed? But secondly, let's go ahead and figure out what's happening, right? And when you do figure out what's happening, block that IP, right? Suspend that user that's been affected, and then go through your full remediation process, right? An investigation and potential remediation if you have it. And then, of course, once you've done that, you know, update your authentication policy. So make sure that next time these users do have phishing-resistant MFA turned on, that other users potentially that are in their same group that have the same policies, make sure right now that they're then enabled for non-phishable MFA, right? So update those authentication policies to make sure that, you know, even if those user credentials get stolen, that's okay. We're going to be protected, falling back to our non-phishable MFA factors. And then lastly, you know, what's next from here, right? So evaluate your readiness. You know, first things first, you have that centralized authentication in place. Would you be able to detect credentials getting phished at the organization and find out who did it? If yes, great. So then what's next? Do you have the non-phishable MFA in place, right? Do you have some of these additional controls in place to make sure that if user credentials are phished, and if and when, as we said, are we going to have that second layer of protection there to make sure that those accounts are never actually compromised? Check out the resources we have for you, of course, and there's other great resources that you've seen today. And lastly, if you want to see how this is actually all put into action, how this can work, of course, always feel free to reach out for a demo. We're happy to show that to you. Oh, and thank you. Thank you all for listening to my TED Talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brandon. That was such a great presentation. And we have a ton of questions coming in that I want to get to. But before we jump into our usual poll or our Q&A session, you actually have a question for the audience here, wondering if they require employees to authenticate with phishing-resistant MFA factors. And there's a couple of answers here up on the screen, a couple of various responses. Brandon, do you want to offer any context to this question here?
Yeah, so as we talked about, Cloudflare was one of these success stories of having this kind of like phishing-resistant MFA in place. But I'll be honest with you, most of the companies I talk to, they might have an offering of FIDO2 at the business, but it's definitely not a requirement or mandatory, unfortunately. So I think, you know, hopefully that culture is starting to change, and a lot of businesses are starting to change how they think about optional versus kind of mandatory compliance with these phishing-resistant MFA factors. But yeah, don't feel bad if you don't have it in place today. That is really common for the businesses I talk to, but you know, let's talk about why.
Well, interesting. So we have, and I know the audience can't see the results coming in, but we have about 38, almost 40% now have chosen that FIDO QR codes. About 16% say no, we don't use any phishing resistant. A little over 20% say no, but we're planning to, and just under 20% say no, and we don't plan to. So it's a pretty interesting spread here. I'm going to throw up the next poll. And thank you to everyone who filled that out. We do want to know what additional information you would like to get about the CyberArk solution. And again, as I've been saying, this is your future self is going to thank you for clicking on this poll because you know you're going to want to follow up. You know you're going to want to read a little bit more. You'll want a little bit more information. So click on this now. And hey, you know it's not phishing because we're here and live. So you can click on these links and you will get the answer that you want in a safe and timely manner. So go ahead and fill out that poll. While you're doing that, Brandon and I are going to get into some Q&A. You ready for some audience questions there?
I love questions. Yes, yes, please.
I know that you do. Okay, perfect. Well, we're going to start with this one from Steven. So he says, I've heard from other companies that passwordless is never going to happen or that it's just not a safe route. So have you heard this statement? And if so, how would you combat that if someone makes that argument to you?
Yeah. So, the password, I actually weirdly love the password, right? It was invented in the 60s. I think it's an amazing innovation when it came out at its time, right? Of how to identify a user. And it made a lot of sense, and it still made a lot of sense throughout, time. But now we're just seeing that it represents this unacceptable risk where, user credentials are on the dark web almost instantly. You sign up for an online account and it gets hacked. And then guess what? Did you reuse that password? Well, now, did you reuse it at the business, right? Because now that could actually represent a pretty big risk to the business. So I think businesses are getting to a place where passwords really, really are starting to represent a pretty large risk. I would tell you 10 years ago, passwordless was probably not feasible. But nowadays, with your identity provider kind of already eliminating a lot of passwords to all your web apps through SAML, you've already eliminated hundreds and thousands of passwords, potentially without even realizing it at your business if you have that. And now if you can eliminate that IDP password, that's another huge win for the organization. And so I think a lot of businesses, the way I would combat it is saying, hey, we might already be doing passwordless authentication without you realizing it. And guess what? We can do even more into the future. And let's talk about how we can eliminate password by password by password. Maybe it's an app by app discussion there.
I love that. That's a great answer, and I'm sure that is coming up for people. We are extremely tight on time, but I'm just going to sneak in this last question from Jim here. He says, and this is interesting, the FBI is warning that cyber criminals have tampered with QR codes to steal consumers' login, financial information, and money. So crooks are altering both digital and physical QR codes and replacing them with malicious code. Does CyberArk have any way to help protect against these QR code attacks?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the QR code that CyberArk offers is actually associated with our mobile application. So in order to use it, you need to use our mobile application. If you scan it on your typical camera app, it just won't do anything, right? And so definitely I think there's a bit of user education there. If you're going to be using QR code to say, hey, don't just be scanning random QR codes on your workstation, on your personal device, etc. But there are instances where we can securely use QR codes and we can really improve that experience. But let's make sure that we're using the vendor's app to scan those QR codes, and that association will be completely risk-free in that regard, right? So to answer your question, we can make QR code authentication work, but you are absolutely right to give a little bit of pause to some of your users that don't just go scanning anyone's QR code in any way, right?
Oh man, every time I hear about something new, it's that mix of sort of panic and well, okay, there's solutions, but just when you think you have a safe area, you scan a QR code at a restaurant. How often do we do that now?
Yeah.
It's hard to relax, Brenna, I tell you. Well, I wish we could keep going on this because there are still quite a few questions. I don't know if you have a little time to hang out on live chat. We will also make sure that we get all the questions over to CyberArk. So for anyone that asked a question that we didn't get to, you will get some answers back to that. Before you take off today, Brendan, if somebody out there is really ready to get started, wants to jump in with CyberArk, what do? What's their first step?
Well, online, you can fill out a demo request if you want, or, if you ask us questions here in this chat, we will follow up with you. You will get an answer, and, if that question is, can I get a demo? We'll follow up and schedule that with you.
I love that. Another great way to make that happen is to literally click on the personal demo option on the poll that is on your screen. Easy peasy, and they'll follow up and make that happen. Brandon, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks, everyone.
All right, and thanks to everyone who filled out that poll. I'm going to leave that up here for just another moment because we are going to give away another prize. So this is our second $500 Amazon gift card. A quick reminder that you do need to be here present at the webinar to win. And our next lucky winner here with us today is Chad Klinger of Texas. Chad Klinger of Texas, you've won a $500 Amazon gift card. We'll be in touch about claiming that prize after we wrap. There is still another chance to win today, plus that best question gift card from each session. But we're going to keep rolling because up next we have another awesome presenter, and I am so happy to introduce you all to James Alaban, Senior Manager Product Strategy at Tessian. James, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm going to hand the mic right on over to you.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jess. Absolutely great to be here. As said, I'm here to talk about navigating the dark corners of social engineering attacks. We're going to take the agenda through three parts today. First and foremost, we're going to cover social engineering attacks, what they mean, what they do, and ultimately the impact of what a social engineering attack could happen to people like yourselves. Secondly, then we're going to talk about behavioral intelligence modeling. We're going to talk about this concept of how we can use behavior, interactions, and people to really start to secure the digital interfaces and the cloud office. And then finally, we're going to go through some practical best practices that you guys can take away with you today, and of course, put that into your real life. So with no further ado, let's dive in. First and foremost, I've thrown a few logos on the screen. And of course, begs the question of why are these logos all on the same slide together? Well, they're a very large list that were all impacted by social engineering attacks that came through law firms, came through firms that were worked with. Now, you just think about some of the logos that we've got here, like Google, Ford, Marriott, for example, Boeing. Imagine the cyber security budget, the IT budgets and security budgets that they have. They're in excess of, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of budgets that they have at their disposal, probably more than a lot of you guys have, which kind of means that one, we have a ton of empathy for what you guys are doing. But secondly, as well, it really is, drastic that they have actually fallen victim to social engineered attacks, actually attacks which in Google's and Ford's case actually cost them over $100 million, which is just crazy when you think about what the investment would have done in the first place. Staggering to think that 90% of all cyber attacks now in 2022 involve some kind of social engineering. That's 9 in 10 of attacks that happen. And then for ransomware attacks, and we know the world of ransomware from WannaCry and other NotPetya and other big attacks happening a few years ago, but ransomware is still extremely prevalent today. And 40% of social engineered attacks result in a piece of ransomware being implemented on technology as well and onto an endpoint or a server. Now, your digital footprint, the footprint that you and I put out on social media, becomes a hacker's toolkit. Now, one question that occasionally comes up to me when I'm speaking to people in the industry at trade shows, et cetera, is, well, why would anyone want to hack me? And I kind of think about it the same for me, really, in that aspect as well. Like, why would anyone want to attack me? Why would anyone want to expose me? And really, the answer is that the bad actors or the hackers hack humans to hack organizations. We are the gatekeeper to that organization. We are the way that person can get into that organization, and we can be ultimately potentially the weak spot in that organization. We make it easy for them as well. 90% of people post their personal and professional lives online. I'll be honest, I'm a victim for this as well. I have a Twitter account that I put a lot of personal stuff on, but I also put professional stuff on as well. To put this in perspective, and example of me there, 3 out of 8 of us on the planet have a Facebook account, and 1 in 8 of us have an Instagram account, and then 1 in 10 of us have a LinkedIn account. So you can see that out of that 7.8, 7.9 billion people, there's a lot of people who have these social media accounts. How many of those are legitimate users? How many of those are fake accounts? And how much information do we put onto these social media platforms? And it's interesting when you just take a step back and think about that for a second. I know you're all joining remotely, and usually my talk track goes into asking a question here around how many people setting out of office. But I do want to just touch on that point for just a second, because when we set an out of office message on our inbox, not only maybe we're telling somebody on Facebook that we're joining a conference in Chicago or London or New York or wherever it may be, we set that Facebook message or Twitter account saying, hey, looking forward to being in Chicago, who wants to meet up for a coffee? And then we also set our out of office, and we tell them, typically, if you're doing your out of offices, how they've been scripted for the last 20 years, we're telling them who should they contact in my absence as well. Look, I'm at an event, or I may be on a webinar, or I may not be available at my desk at this moment in time. It's really interesting when you think about it from that forte, because reality is we're given a lot of information that is easily accessible to somebody. And ultimately as well, like when you think about all of this information, all the people and all the different organizations around the world, like how are bad actors finding people like you or I? Well, people are finding bad actors, people are finding people such as like nation states like Russia, China, etc. as well. They use machine learning. They use that, and it's a thrown around term, right? But reality is they scour social media and press and news wires. They use data science, data harvesting to allow them to run at compute speed that faster than you and I can ever think, ever compute, faster than some of the computers that we're typically utilizing on a daily basis could ever process information. They spend billions of dollars on compute speed to be able to process data as quickly as possible. And then critically, once they've identified their target, a bad actor then can create a highly targeted spear phishing attack. Let's take a look at an example of what that may look like. Bringing this to life and how a hacker leverages machine learning to scour newswires and social media to pull off the attack. Leveraging machine learning to crawl through the newswires, a bad actor was able to come across a consulting firm. This consulting firm called Darling Clayton, they were advising SoBank and Ardent Tech on a joint venture. So already you can see there's an element of social engineering here. They've realized a compelling event. Through LinkedIn, they had identified New York-based CFO of the SoBank, Andrew Neal, and then the senior partner, Gregory Elwood, from the consulting firm. And through that, they can see who is advising them on the merger as well. So they've got some really concise pieces of information. On LinkedIn, the bad actor finds a post from the SoBank CFO, realizing that he's excited to speak at a conference in Chicago. That's the reason why I spoke about Chicago earlier. And on the day of the conference, what they do then is they know that point in time. They know the compelling event. They know their time to strike. Because on the day of the conference, they send an email to the CFO getting an out of office message. That's why I asked you about out of offices earlier. And from there, they're able to get the name and the contact information, for his assistant, as well as learning that the CFO personally goes by Andy as well. So they know that Andrew internally and around his friends is called Andy. So they use this. They create a fake email that looks like it's been forwarded to the CFO's assistant, requesting a money transfer to an updated account. Sounds really simple, right? Like almost not believable. And people say to me at this moment, they go, well, does this attack truly work, James? Like it just doesn't sound quite real. Unfortunately, this was the exact same spear phishing scam, exactly the same scenario that cost Google and Ford and Facebook hundreds of millions of dollars. It still works today. It's still a tried and tested campaign. Then you look at it and go, well, trust on email is at an all-time low. Do we really trust the interactions we have on email? But how do we get here? I was recently asked while seeing such a rise in the number of sophisticated phishing attacks and, asked again, like, does this really work? Well, the reason it really works and the reason why phishing attacks just continue to rise, social engineering attacks rise, are being asked again, like, why is this attack surface just continuing to rise? Why is this attack surface just not slowing down? It's because it works. It's tried and tested. As I said earlier, it is a tried and tested methodology. But why an email? Well, email is the last open standard of communication. Email can reach anyone in an organization. Social engineering makes the email more personalized. We like that personal touch as humans. We like people to feel like they know us. And the global pandemic has made us more reliant on email than ever before. And as a result, the business email compromise is now the number one cybercrime. 91% of cyber attacks, as I said earlier, begin with a spear phishing email. And then according to IBM's cost of data breach report, a breach caused by phishing costs an organization an average of $4.65 million. But how are hackers bypassing legacy security products? First and foremost, we have to take ourselves back a step at a time because we have to look at these legacy solutions, be it a secure email gateway or Microsoft built-in email security features. They're just not made for today's modern attack surface. They're not made today to be able to stop today's attacks because they rely on a threat intelligence approach. They rely on known. They rely on us already knowing about that threat and stopping it because it's already been seen before. But what happens if that's a highly impersonated attack? What happens if that's not an attachment with an MD5 hatch that we've seen time after time after time? What happens if that's something that's new? Well, it just gets through. Rules and signatures just don't work. Now, it's not to say that these legacy solutions don't have their place, because of course they have their purpose, ensuring email hygiene, ensuring their attachments and URLs are safe, spam, email productivity, reducing spam, such a critical part of any component to operationalizing an organization. I'm not saying that legacy solutions don't have their place. But the problem is these legacy products fail to stop advanced email attacks such as account takeovers, business email compromise, supplier, vendor impersonation attacks. These attacks pass right through because legacy email products often pass sender authentication checks, domains and DMARC also often pass as well. So, as I promised you earlier, part 2 of today's session, we'll talk about behavioral intelligence modeling and why we need to utilize behavioral intelligence to stop these highly targeted advanced attacks on email. Behavioral intelligence modeling is the key to preventing these threats. You understand what's normal for your end users and detect anomalies and the normal behaviors to detect these threats. So how does it work? Well, in Tessian's world, how this works is as soon as it's deployed, we train machine learning models on up to 6 months worth of historical data. We're able to build a digital footprint. Effectively, every end user's inbox is a digital footprint of their email and data sharing behaviors. And then we train our models to understand what normal and anomalous email activity looks like. And from that point of view, we essentially build up a profile of each individual, their risk, how they interact with email, their understanding of what they typically send, what kind of file types they typically send, how they communicate with each other if they call Andrew Andy, for example. We call this behavioral intelligence modeling, and we build these models for every end user. And after that, our models are trained, and Tessian is ready to start automatic preventing threats. So just after 24 hours after deployment, Tessian will automatically scan every incoming and outgoing email for threats. So for example, if an incoming email is a phishing email or an employee has incorrectly added the wrong recipient to an email, Tessian will not only detect the threat, but prevent it from causing harm. Because in the moment when the behavioral intelligence models detect something is unusual, we notify the employee in real time, explain to them what we think is wrong. Our customers love that. They call that in the moment security coaching. And we love this term, being coached in that very moment that something may happen, how to make something more memorable. Test me. I'd love to find a way to find that more memorable than that. Oh my days, I nearly got done by a phishing attack. And I know why, because this solution has told me everything about it. And that's going to sit in my head. Now I know it's a memorable moment. And of course, because we're also constantly running that feedback loop in the model, to constantly improve the system's understanding of you and your business. Patterns are changing, threats are detected, and we can see new patterns of behavior. So let's take a look at a few different real-life examples of how these may work in the real world. First and foremost, let's take a look at an example of a spear phishing attack. So this spear phishing attack is a display name lookalike impersonation. And what that means in human terms is somebody has changed the display name to look like somebody else. Now, you'll notice the red flags that I've indicated on the screen, indicating why the email suspects. So let's take a look into why. First and foremost, for display names, predefined rules that legacy solutions rely on don't account for the almost infinite number of domains and subdomains, display names, and address permutations. Also, you'll see here as well the suspicious link. Tools that scan URLs won't see that URL on the page because where the URL actually drives to. So this looks like a SharePoint link, but it's not actually a SharePoint link. It drives to 3 different URLs behind it. And the urgency as well, with natural language and processing, we can understand the context and the communication patterns within that body of the email. We can see that there's urgency in this email. There's something that doesn't look right. Why is this person sending a really weird link and asking for them to react really quickly as well? We should probably do something about this. So now we run it through our system. We run it through testing. We take a look at what the email may look like. First and foremost, we ingest the historical email data to know what's normal and what's not. No rules required. In this case, we recognize that the sender's email address is rarely seen on that network. It's a new email address to that organization. For second, we also saw that the URL looked suspicious, as from previous attacks we'd seen within our global threat network, we could see that this was a malicious URL. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, through natural language and processing, we was able to see the urgency in this email. We saw there was something just not quite right. Another example of a spear phishing attempt in this case is the attacker was impersonating Microsoft Teams with a direct spoof impersonation method, which what they were doing here was credential harvesting. They're trying to gain credentials for access for an account takeover attack. Now, the domain itself isn't suspicious. The email didn't fail any authentication checks. The malicious page had never been seen in the previous attack, so it wasn't on a denial list. It wasn't identified as a malicious link. And formatting, after slipping past technology controls, employees were actually left as the last line defense here. It was for the employee to see whether this was a malicious email or not. It passed all lines of defense. And most won't question the legitimacy of this particular email. But when we looked at it, we could see 2 really critical things on this email. First and foremost, we detected anomalies of the sender's server IP address and geographical location. We could see that they weren't based in the location they typically are. Also as well, as you can see here, we could see that there was COVID-19 updates as well with phishing attacks increasing. And we could see there was elements of urgency and the suspicious link as well, as we understood this was a spoof. And we understand it wasn't a correct Microsoft Teams link. And then finally, let's take a look at another example here. This spear phishing attempt used Microsoft file sharing to be able to see a display name lookalike and credential harvesting. Again, predefined rule sets, which legacy solutions rely on, don't account for almost the infinite number of domains, as I mentioned earlier. The suspicious link in here as well. We could see this link went directly to a malicious URL. And of course, the formatting here as well was a major issue in this particular email. So when we looked at it, we could see again these 2 major areas. First, the display name. We could see that the display name imitates the target company, ACME, and the sender is not from there. They were from beta.itk. So we could see that was an anomaly straight away. And secondly, testing, we understood that the email had a malicious lookalike and did not rely on detecting malicious payloads as well. And I think we've just got time for one more. So I'll take you through one more example just to really cement what I'm talking about here. The spear phishing attempt impersonated internal piece of software in this particular example. We can see the display name. Again, it was just invented. The suspicious link, legacy solutions that only scan from malicious payloads. This link had never been seen in a previous attack. And the legacy security system would not detect keywords like wire transfer or account details as suspicious language. But we put this together and we thought there's three really key areas here that we're just not quite sure about. First and foremost, we could see that the platform that display name looked malicious, and we could see that they weren't from where we thought they were from, and the sender was new. Our global threat network was identifying here that we could see that this the link in the email, the suspicious link, was a malicious link. We could see it was a bit.ly link and where it went to, and it matches the patterns in previous attacks. And of course, the shortened link as well meant it was more difficult to know which website that you were going to click on. So bringing that to a close, it's really clear to me and clear as we drive through that it's time for a new approach to email security. We have to leverage behavioral intelligence. We have to shift away from a static behavioral approach. We need to empower users to become part of the solution. Our end users, well-educated, security-aware end users, can be one of the most critical lines to defense, and we've got the opportunity to educate them. We can tailor coaching on real-world examples that will hit your organization on a weekly basis, and yet we can use that opportunity to educate them properly. So with that, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to hand back over to Jess to ask a few questions.
Yeah, James, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Lots of great phishing tips. I have to say, every time I look at these examples, it's sort of, you find yourself kind of laughing and also feeling fear simultaneously, because they're so, some of them feel really obvious and some of them feel so subtle. And I think about those times when my brain has just turned off and I've clicked on an email and then gone, oh no, I should check the URL and I should, read all the attachment links. And it's so easy to just drop for a second.
It really is. It's interesting. My wife sent me over an example that came over to the other day. I think it was like last week. And we order a ton of things from Amazon, right? As I'm sure many people do. And and because obviously in my job, she tends to always check and just ask, which is great because I'm clearly doing something right in my household. But the point is she asked me, and I kind of saw the identification points really quickly. But she turned around and said, honestly, like, it's so subtle. Like, I was expecting a parcel, and look, it was just a spray and pray. It knew nothing about us. It didn't know that we was expecting a parcel. But the point was you wonder how many people it does catch. You go and go, wow, yes. Like, it's so subtle. Like, there was no way that you could just differentiate that. But at the same time, I think we can educate ourselves well, and we can dig in.
Absolutely. And this is why these types of solutions are so important, is because we can't just assume that, it's not going to come in with big, bright flashing lights that alert you to a scam anymore. There's no used car salesman kind of feel to them anymore. So we also have to be smarter and more equipped. Well, speaking of which, I think the audience has some really great questions here that I would love to jump into before we wrap today. So I'm going to start with this one here. What is your recommendation for showing ROI for a social engineering solution? And I'm going to ask you for a little bit of an add-on to that one, James. Can you tell us, what would be the answer both before the solution is purchased? So if you're in the process of convincing maybe a leadership team that there's ROI for a social engineering solution, and then what are you looking for maybe 6 months to a year down the line after you've deployed?
No, of course. I think first and foremost with any security stack, it has to mature, and it's, you look at it and go, it's so easy to look at what you have, look at a replacement and go back to the board and say, hey, I'm just replacing what I already have. And that's well and good, but it's kind of like this repetitive process. And then finding room in that security stack for something else, like, I get it, like purse strings aren't always that open from that point of view. For me, it comes down to risk. And when you're talking to the board, like, the most important thing to the board or to whoever's controlling the purse strings is, how much am I willing to put the brand's reputation at risk to that organization? So really, that from that point of view, what we're really talking about here is, can we mitigate some capacity of risk by understanding the parameters of adding that additional layer of defense? Can we look at what's getting through? And, quite clearly, any technology such as Tessian can take a look at, through a proof of value, for example, take a look at what's getting through your current defenses. So you can really scope that and say, like, hey, this is what 2 weeks has shown me. That's the risk to the organization. And this is ultimately how much it's going to cost me to help me mitigate that risk. But I think the most important conversation is not really a technology conversation. It's not really deep into the weeds of how the technology works or anything like that. For me, it's really simply like risk and reward. We have to really have that conversation about, this is the risk, this is the exposure to the organization. You've employed me to defend the organization, and this is how I feel we can mitigate some of that risk, especially on email in this particular scenario. And this is the presentation of what I'm going to tell you of how we can overcome that risk.
Well, yeah, that risk reward is a key element here. And I think this one will connect in terms of looking for that value add as well. So the question is, when talking about SOC team relief, is there an estimate of how much of their time is going to be saved with this automation?
Absolutely. So I want to dig into this a little bit deeper. I have got so much empathy, and I've spoken a lot in my career around like SOC burnout and how people are looking for exit paths out of security. And it just blows my mind. Like, I personally love working in security. I think there's just so much we can get out. But I also understand from a vendor point of view that I don't think we've done enough over the years to really make people's jobs easy. We've kind of thrown technology at the problems. We've kind of gone, hey, like, there's a technology for this, let's just do that, and et cetera, et cetera. And what we haven't really then done is we've just created a lot of alerts. We've created a lot of noise. We've created a lot of technology doing multiple different things. Ultimately, it's time for change. It's time to take a different approach there. It's time to empower these thought leaders and these security leaders who work within security operations to be empowered to be the defenders of their organization. Now, that's really the job. That's really what they want to be. They're on the front line. They're defending that organization on a daily basis. So from that point of view, I just touching on it, reducing noise, reducing those alerts, empowering your end users. I mentioned it earlier. If you can turn 40% of an organization into becoming a part of your security team, i.e. end users like Jess, you and I, for example, and not clicking on that phishing link because you've coached them and you've told them, you're already adding ROI. Like, we're having that conversation straight away. We're already telling you that, well, you've mitigated risk for one, but secondly, you've also cut down noise as well. A little bit out of the Forrester TEI report that we ran through a few months ago, we identified it was around about 600 hours on average that an organization is losing to alerts and noise and phishing investigations within security operations. So 600 hours we can gain back for, depending on the size of the organization. That average was 10,000 users. Obviously, that'll go up or down depending on how many people. Ultimately, kind of to take home from that is, I could place a number on it and I can say, yeah, okay, you can save that many hours. For me, it's the actual lasting effects as well of coaching users and asking them to be part of your security team. And you can turn that into fun games as well with them and turn it into competitions. There's so many things you can do.
I like that idea. I'm big on gamification. Well, that's awesome. And James, honestly, I feel like I could talk to you about this all afternoon, but we are very short on time, so we're going to have to leave it there. But before you leave us, if somebody out there is really excited about Tessian, and I know that the entire audience is, they're ready to jump in, what's their first step? What do they do?
Absolutely. You can go to www.tessian.com. You can talk to us. You can book a demo on there. You'll talk to people like myself. You can talk to some of the fantastic sales team as well that we've got across the globe. There's also a couple of salespeople here as well from Tessian that are willing and happy to talk to people as well. So with all of that, there's many communication channels. There's also the little widget in the bottom hand side of our website, and that's typically manned as well, so you can have a conversation across the business. But we're more than happy, very warm and welcoming, and more than happy to have a conversation with any of you.
Well, I can definitely attest to that. I've had great experiences with you and your team, James. Thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
No, thank you so much for having me, Jess.
Okay, and we've got that poll question up for you now, and what we want to know is, what additional information would you like to get about the Tessian solution? So we just got some really incredible information from James. I don't know about you guys, but I am, my brain's just buzzing from these conversations today. So, again, stacking information on information, it's not all going to stay there. So you're going to want these little reminders. So click on the poll now and let Tessia know what they can send you so that later when you're thinking, oh, what was that cool thing, that solution? I can't remember that detail that James said. It'll be right there in your email inbox. You won't even have to go hunting for it, but they'll be able to send you exactly what you need. So click on that poll, let them know how they can follow up with you. Okay, and while you're clicking on that poll, I also want to remind you to head on over to the handout section, click on that Tessian link, and you can actually find a customer story there. In this case, it's from Taylor Vinters. It's a comprehensive email security for global legal and advisory sales firm. So a really cool walkthrough. I mean, a lot of times, we talk in, high up in the hypotheticals, and this is a really cool use case, use study, case study, all of those words together. And you can find that all in one handout. So head on over to that handouts tab and download that to read a little bit later. But for now, we are going to move along because, folks, I don't know how this happens. Every time I feel like we're cruising, and then we hit that last presentation, and here we are already. It has already come. We're at our last session of the day. But I want to promise you that we are definitely ending on a high note because up next, we have here with us Carson Cheers, Manager Sales Engineer at Rapid7. Carson, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know you have an absolutely info-packed session for us, so I'm going to hand the mic right on over to you.
Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. Let me get started. Again, my name is Carson Cheers. I'm a manager of Threat Intelligence Solution Engineering here at Rapid7. And today specifically, I want to help you understand how you can have proactive phishing prevention, and basically by empowering your protectors with threat intelligence. So let's start with the agenda. We're going to talk about what's new in phishing. I want to help you understand how you can stop a phishing attack before it happens. Then I want to show you our dashboard so you can see a real life example of how it works. And then we'll wrap up with any Q&A that you may have. So, I mean, it goes without saying that no organization is immune to cyber attacks. As we see things like the perimeter kind of disappearing with people moving to the cloud, not just organizations, but also consumers, with more and more transactions happening online. People aren't carrying cash anymore, right? Everything is done electronically, even with cryptocurrency. It's just allowing for us to be more convenienced, but it's also putting a larger target on our backs. Our friends at Verizon actually break this down, and I love this slide. It comes from the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report for 2022. You can click the link at the bottom of the slide if you'd like, but it's basically articulating that there are 4 paths to your estate, or 4 paths to your company's infrastructure, and they're credentials, phishing, exploitable vulnerability, or exploited vulnerabilities, I should say, and botnets. And it is not a question so much of you having to figure out which one is more dangerous, but instead, as defenders, as leaders, you're going to have to answer, how dangerous is it that we don't cover each one of these? Because there are 4 paths to your estate, which means that I could choose leaked credentials, or I could choose phishing, or I could choose vulnerabilities or botnets. But more often than not, it's a combination. Threat actors are using botnets and phishing infrastructure to steal leaked credentials. So now those phishing attacks are not coming from impersonations or imposters, but actual corporate accounts. And then they take out the human aspect and they use technology and vulnerabilities that have been exploited and not currently patched. And so again, a lot of this begins while we're sleeping, while we're resting, while we're not even thinking about work, because it's happening on the dark web. And I'll show you that in just a moment. One more final thing, though, is if we want to kind of wrap up with the statistics, there's a 61% increase in phishing attacks, but not only are phishing attacks increasing in number, but they're increasing in complexity. 74% of employees are advising that they receive fraudulent text messages and phone calls, right? I'm quite sure all of us are, or all of you, I should say, are probably guilty of not extending your car's extended warranty. And that's why the phone keeps ringing, right? But these attacks are coming in multiple ways, not just through email, but through various ways. If you want to know how complex it is, well, let's go to the dark web. This is where these things happen. There's a famous saying that says you no longer need to be technically savvy to launch an attack. You just need to have $1 and a grudge. So you can see here that I can literally create a scam page for a bank for like $5, and then it may go up to like $40. And if I want to spend the quote unquote big boy money, I can, spend $310. But if I spend $310, knowing that the return on investment is going to get me like $30,000, then why wouldn't I? So the dark web is where threat actors solicit and purchase services. So again, I don't have to have the technological chops, but instead I can literally go to Hackers for Rent or Genesis Market or Russian Market, all these different sites, and I can buy whatever I need. So that's enough with data and what threat actors are doing. What can you do? Well, Rapid7 wants to help you repel phishing attacks in 4 easy steps. It starts in the upper left. We want you to be able to detect. In other words, look at the dark web, look at chatter, understand if there's cloning, if there's redirects, if anyone is scraping code on your page and putting it somewhere else. We want to empower you to be able to investigate and monitor this. We're going to talk about blocking in a moment, but before you block, understand if there is a deeper phishing infrastructure that you need to know about. And then once you have that data, then you can fully remediate. And remediate is actually in 2 categories. It's blocking internally, but then also remediating externally, such as pulling down those bad websites or those fake social media pages. So let's look at an actual real life example. I'm going to share my screen. Get that shared. And if someone who is on the phone, if you can let me know, are you able to see the suspected phishing domain page?
I gotcha, Kirsten. You're all good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so if we're looking at okay, cool. If we're looking at this page, this is an example of an alert that you could see within your organization. So you will let Rapid7 know, hey, this is my digital real estate. These are my digital assets. So an asset is just a fancy way of saying the pieces of computer bits that are on the internet that are related to your company. So things like your company names, your domain names, your brand names, your VIPs, your public repositories, your BIN numbers if you're in a financial institution. And then we'll begin to scour cyberspace with both our technology as well as our analysts to go and find how these things are being misused. So we can bring this to your attention. We can let you know, in this case, our domain is int sites with 1 eye, but we see this fraudulent domain of int sites with 2 eyes. We want to empower you to understand, where is this? It's on the clear web and it came from a DNS query. What does it look like? Well, here is a screenshot of the who is information and also what the website currently looks like. This is a description of what's happening, and this is what we recommend that you do. Now from here, I mean, you can go ahead and remediate. Like, you can actually take the URL, the domain, and you can feed that into your URL and your mail filtering solutions, which is good. But there is a deeper portion of this, because this could be a result of a phishing infrastructure. So we want you to be able to understand that. So if we look at this domain, we can actually investigate it and see what else is connected. Give me a second, I have to share one more page here. Hang on for me. Go over here. All right. If I can get one more confirmation, can you see this investigation page?
10-4, we gotcha.
Okay, perfect. So again, if this was real life, not on the shared session, it would be a little bit more seamless. But basically, we went from that alert that told us about that phishing domain, and now we can investigate it. And by investigate, I mean, is there a phishing infrastructure related? In this case, we see a threat actor registered the domain, and the domain is associated with a couple of IP addresses. And this IP address is also associated with malware and also some domains, but it appears that these domains are not malicious, at least right now. But if we look at this IP address and we expand it, then we'll get some even juicier details, if you will, because we'll see that it's also related to some malicious file hashes, some malicious software, and possibly some other threat actor engagement. So in a live view, you'll be able to see the phishing infrastructure that might be related to that organization or to that threat actor. And then from there, now you can remediate. And by remediate, I mean you can do this externally and internally. From an internal standpoint, take the different file hashes, take the IP addresses, take the domain, and then add them to a block list. And that block list can be fed into your email security, your network security, your SIM, your SOAR, your EDR, all your different acronyms that you use in your tech stack to prevent the threat actor from communicating to your end users. But then you can also use our services to request a takedown of the site and or domain. So we'll actually pull that down for you. And if any of you have ever tried to do this on your own, then you know it's difficult. It's typically you have to fall back to a cease and desist, so you have to wait for the registrar to agree with you. The secret sauce that we have is that we already have a relationship with these different registrars, so it's much easier for us to be able to do the takedowns. So that's a real life example. So if we get ready to kind of wrap up, and then we'll open it up for any Q&A, how can you do this? How can you summarize this? Well, you can repel phishing attacks in 4 steps. Detect early, monitor continuously, take down quickly, disseminate widely. So be able to detect when things are happening on the clear, deep, and dark web. The sooner you detect it, then the quicker you can stop it. Once you do detect it, monitor it. Understand how the threat actor is thinking so that you can perform better as a defender. Once you understand that, take down quickly. So do a takedown of the actual site or engage with the threat actor using our services on the dark web so you can make those things, you can make that purchase for things being listed for sale so that you can understand how they may be used against you. And then finally, your tech stack is thirsty for IOCs, so you have to disseminate the different IOCs, disseminate that threat intelligence so that you can prevent further attacks. So all of these are possible within the Rapid7 Threat Intelligence solution. We would definitely love to get a chance to talk to you and learn about the projects that you have as an organization and how they could be at risk because of the different threats that are on cyberspace. But this slide kind of gives a quick overview. So multiple products, specifically we're talking about threat intelligence, so being able to have digital risk protection, being able to have a SecOps threat intelligence platform, being able to get enrichment around vulnerabilities. If you're preparing for a merger and acquisition and you want to understand the risk associated with that third-party solution, third-party company, I should say, then you can actually run a report and understand what cyber risks are available to them. So that is my time. So that is our solution. More than willing to stick around and answer any questions or address any comments that you guys may have.
I love that. Thank you so much, Carson, for that awesome presentation and those great demos. We definitely got a couple of high fives coming in from the audience. People, always really nice to be able to see some of those things in action and functioning there. So that was really cool. I do want to point out to everyone in the audience that we have a poll up for you all. And what we're wondering is what additional information you would like to get about the Rapid7 solution. So, you know, one of the options on there is personal demo. And you guys just got kind of a very brief insight into what a demo might look like with Rapid7, and so you can dig in a little bit more personally, get that demo that's, you know, specific to you and what your needs are going to be, and really, you know, dig into the solution there. So click on that option on the poll if that's something you're interested in. There's lots of other selections there, and again, your future self will thank you for choosing one of those options now and making your life easier, because Rapid7 is going to follow up with you and make sure you get whatever information it is that is going to be most helpful to you. And Ivan has just chimed in and said, amazing demo there, Karsten. So you're continuing to get some accolades here. All right, well, I think we should probably jump into some Q&A here because we've got lots coming in. You ready for that?
Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. So this first one here, in your experience, what other departments outside of cybersecurity teams are involved in phishing protection for companies?
Yeah, so obviously, cybersecurity teams are quote unquote the main individuals responsible for it. But more often than not, cybersecurity teams they have to be reactive versus proactive, because marketing and sales can spin up different campaigns where they're registering new domains about new products. And unfortunately, they don't let security teams know. And so if a cybersecurity team does detect a site that may be suspicious, or a social media page that may be suspicious, they can't just do a takedown. They have to check with legal and marketing first. So legal is often involved. Marketing is often involved. They have a say-so with that. Brand security, a lot of teams have separate brand security teams. So one of the things that Rapid7 offers is you get unlimited user access to the platform. And we also support role-based access control. So if legal and marketing need to be made aware if there is a suspicious phishing site or a social media page, but they don't need to get information about credit cards being leaked, then you can separate those alerts and that duty so that the right people can get involved. So that's a long way of me saying more often than not, marketing and legal are heavily involved in that as well.
That's so interesting, and I think that's something that often gets forgotten, that, we talk about fast action, but you can't always take fast action depending on your setup in your company. So yeah, that's hugely key. Actually, on the note of sort of human involvement, question here from Rob: how involved is Rapid7 in identifying and remediating bad actors and threats? And I think what he's getting at here, because he clarifies like off hours and weekends, how much support can somebody count on from the Rapid7 team?
So when we're talking about specifically threat intelligence, we offer 24/7, 365. So if you have the unfortunate circumstance where you're working a Saturday morning at 2 a.m., you still have access not just to the platform, but as well as the people. So there are a couple of things here. When we're scouring cyberspace, clear, deep, and dark web, we have a very powerful tool stack that can actually go out and find different things. Unfortunately, the thing that technology cannot do is read the intent of the human heart. So this is why we still need analysts that are involved as well. So our analysts can access these different illicit forums and dark web sites that technology can't get to in and of itself. And we have a feature within our platform, and it's called Ask the Analyst. And those analysts, it's not a bot, it's not a script, but it's an actual security practitioner. They are literally available 24/7, 365. So in addition to pumping alerts into the platform, if you need further information around it, if you do need to do a takedown at a random time, or if you just want to understand what's the reputation of this threat actor, you have immediate access to those analysts at any time. The final thing I'll say is that we also have a module called Threat Library, and that is always being updated with the latest campaigns, IOCs, threat actors. And you can take that information and immediately disseminate that into the rest of your security stack. So we're always available for you.
I love that. Yeah, both there as active support, and then providing that, preemptive and proactive knowledge base as well.
Exactly.
Okay, question here from Kevin. First of all, he starts by saying this is a very cool visual mapping example. He's wondering how far back the users can push their search parameters.
Oh, yeah, great question. So I don't want to say it's unlimited, right? Because at the end of the day, it's technology and there's storage, right? So I don't want to give you a false hope. Well, it just is anytime. But as technically possible as you can get to being unlimited, that is what we offer. When it comes to, for example, we have a module called Vulnerability Risk Analyzer. And what that does is it allows for you to get enrichment around the different CVEs. The missing part of every vulnerability management strategy is always external threat intelligence. It's great to understand the CVSS score. It's great to understand that these are the hosts that are affected. But what's missing is which one of these CVEs are more popular, which one of these CVEs are being actively exploited right now, which one of these CVEs are being used by threat actors that are specifically targeting my organization. So within that module, you're able to see how that CVE has changed in popularity, and you can go back days, weeks, months, or years to see how popular the CVE has been in different times. Because it may be interesting to know that last March, this was really, really big and popping, but all of a sudden it dropped off. But then this year, in this March, it went up again. So is there a trend? Is there a connection? So it's virtually unlimited within reason, if that makes sense. So yeah.
That does, yes. And Mark here is wondering if the system requires any hardware to install or just software. And I'm going to add on to that. How long would it take if somebody decides they want to jump in with Rapid7? How long is it going to take them before they're ready to rock?
Yeah. So we are 100% cloud-based. So because we're communicating with cyberspace, there's nothing for you to install on-prem. It's done within our portal. The only caveat with that is if you want us to integrate with one of your on-prem solutions, such as your network firewall, if we're finding these different IP addresses and domains, and you want to push that to an on-prem device, then you would spin up a lightweight virtual appliance. It's lightweight. We walk you through it. That's the only on-prem hardware, if you will. And again, it's virtual, but that's the only on-prem work you have to do. Everything else is cloud-based. If you want us to connect to another cloud solution, it's direct cloud to cloud, such as your Azure Sentinel, for example, or your Azure AD or your CrowdStrike or what have you. As far as
pretty quick, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And to the next part, as far as how soon, if once you let us know what your digital assets are and we have that conversation and we get it loaded into our platform, 3 to 4 business days later, you're ready to roll. And the cool thing about threat intelligence is it is an immediate return on investment. You don't have to wait weeks and months and years, but being able to immediately see which credentials have already been leaked, which one of your VIPs has their social security number being listed for sale, what threat actors are talking about, how they have your BIN numbers and account numbers listed for sale, that is immediate. So in about a week, you're ready to get rolling with threat intelligence.
That's pretty reasonable. I like that reminder that ROI is immediate. We're getting pretty close to the end of time here, but I'm going to sneak in one more question. What takedown services does Rapid7's threat intelligence solution offer?
So we can do takedowns of malicious websites, social media impersonation, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so on and so forth. Public repositories, so your GitHub, GitLab, if there's code that's being leaked or secrets is being leaked. Mobile applications, so if there's a rogue mobile app, if someone's pretending to be your official app, but they're not. And then we can also tap into chat services such as Telegram. We're seeing actually an influx of that where threat actors are saying, hey, I have these credit cards, they're $50 a pop, just reach out to me on Telegram. We can actually work with Telegram to pull those down. So those are the 5 areas where we can do remediation services.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Kirsten, I wish we could keep chatting, honestly, and there's lots more to cover here, clearly, with all of these. But for somebody out there that is interested in carrying that conversation forward, they want to jump in with Rapid7, what do you recommend? What is their first step?
Yeah, so obviously you can, within the slide deck, we have an email address that's listed here. You can contact us on our website, and then obviously depending upon where you're located, we will get the right person in touch with you, and we'll love to have a conversation, get you a live demo, answer all the questions that you need. And obviously we want you to become a Rapid7 customer, but most importantly, we want you to be able to make an informed decision. So we'll be glad to have those conversations. We're just a phone call or email away.
I love that. That's so important to start with. Is sure, obviously, everyone here thinks their solution is amazing, but I think also everyone here is interested in that information sharing first and making sure that you're equipped to get answers to the questions that you have and that you're choosing the right solution for you and your organization. So I appreciate that approach. And thank you so much, Carson. This has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
My pleasure. You guys be safe. Thank you so much.
And I do want to remind everyone to click on that poll if you haven't already. Also, head on over to the Handouts tab, and if you select the Rapid 7 link there, you can actually find Karsten's entire the slide deck. So if you're interested in kind of reliving the fun that we just had over the last 20-some minutes, click on that link, and you can download that slide deck, go through it on your own time, take a look, and maybe decide what further questions you have, and then you can follow up with Rapid 7 about those in particular. Also, if you asked a question that we did not get to today, because I know there was quite a few, don't worry, we're going to make sure that Rapid 7 and Karsten get those questions, so you will get a chance to get answers to all of those questions, so keep those coming in. I'm going to leave that poll up just a moment longer, and we're going to give away our very last $500 Amazon gift card. I'm going to remind you one more time that you do need to be here present live at the EcoCast in order to win. And our last winner of a $500 Amazon gift card is Linda Cerna of Illinois. Linda Cerna of Illinois. So congratulations, Linda. And a quick recap of our 3 winners here today. Daniel Hawkinson of Illinois. Oh, we had 2 Illinois. Daniel Hawkinson of Illinois, Chad Klinger of Texas, and Linda Cerna, also of Illinois. So Illinois coming in strong today. Congratulations to all 3 of you, and a reminder to all of you who asked a question, there's still a chance to win that best question card. We will be reviewing all of the questions asked after we wrap today, so there's still a chance that you will hear back about that. Okay, now if you are here on the EcoCast with us today and you're thinking, this seems like a lot of fun, it is, folks. It's a ton of fun. You should come join me. If you want to come hang out with David, Scott, and myself on a future summit, EcoCast, or MegaCast, webinar, whatever you have in mind, we would absolutely love to hear from you. So reach out to us via email at connect@actualtechmedia.com. Well, with that, here we are. Keeps happening faster and faster at the end of our session today. So on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our speakers today from KnowBe4, from Zscaler, CyberArk, Tessian, and Rapid7 for making this EcoCast possible. I also want to extend a special thank you to all of you for attending, for asking some really wonderful questions. I have to say, folks, you know, and I feel like I say this every time, we always get great questions. Today, I was just blown away by the depth and the quality and the insightfulness of the questions that we got, and I know our speakers were all really impressed and happy too. So thank you so much for really showing up and being a part of this discussion today. It really is opportunities like this when we get to talk with each other, we get to talk with experts, we get to learn from one another. This is what makes me feel like, you know, we got this, right? You know, these threats are evolving quickly, but so are all of us. And that's really exciting to be a part of that and to be joining in that with you every week, really. So thank you all again for coming to join in that. I hope you're all feeling charged up. I hope you're feeling ready to bring some new best practices, some strategies, some solutions to your organization. Now, before you take off today, please make sure that you mark your calendars and come back and join us again on Wednesday, November 9th. That's next week on Wednesday for a MegaCast on crafting a transformed IT blueprint, storage, infrastructure, cloud, DR security, ops, and more. I mean, basically everything. We're going to talk about all the important stuff, how to craft that transformed IT blueprint. So come on back and chat with us. That's Wednesday, November 9th, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. I hope that I get to see you all again there. And until then, I hope you all have absolutely beautiful ends to your day.